Hey everyone, welcome back. Quick thanks to the patrons who keep this channel alive. Your requests are what I narrate next. If you want to join them, you can try Patreon free for 7 days, then it's starting with just $3 a month. Links in the description. Now, let's get into the story.
Father, I don't understand all this, just because he's the Shafik heir. The boy called Draco was handsome enough, though his face carried a sickly pallor, his expression fixed in the same arrogance as his father's. Draco Malfoy couldn't make sense of it. They too were one of the sacred 28, so why should his father go so far out of his way to court an orphan? That was right, he took Aris for an orphan. Every member of the Shafik family besides Aris had vanished, after all. Come to think of it, Draco decided, the fellow was rather pitiable. It doesn't matter that you don't understand now. One day you will. Lucius Malfoy's lips curled slightly into a faintly strange smile. That boy is a walking treasure. A family's wealth is spent in the end, we'll need to keep drawing on new sources, won't we? Draco frowned, plainly missing the deeper meaning in his father's words. But he'd noted one thing well enough, befriend Aris once he got to school. Well, if the fellow knows what's good for him. He, Draco, was being generous enough to let an orphan keep his company. The Leaky Cauldron. The luxury suite on the top floor. Aris had always wondered, was the Leaky Cauldron truly the only place to stay in Diagon Alley? As it turned out, it was. When Henry had brought him and Luna to this shabby-looking pub, he'd asked outright, and Henry had confirmed it without a shadow of doubt. The place, though, ran somewhat contrary to Aris's expectations. The pub's ordinary rooms were nothing lavish, a little worn, even, then again, the Leaky Cauldron's history reached back to the early 16th century. Standing for centuries, weathering wind and rain to survive to this day, was a small miracle in itself, one that would have been impossible without magic. But the top-floor suite was extraordinarily opulent, its walls and furniture near as good as new, the whole thing done in a heavy, mysterious style very much in the wizarding vein. That, Aris hadn't anticipated. Naturally, the rent to match was steep, but for Aris, anything money could solve was no problem at all. Young master, you'll stay here for the time being. Henry led Aris into the suite and made his introductions with care. There are 3 rooms in all, you and Miss Luna may take whichever you like. The staff will attend you around the clock, those who lodge here are generally their most honored guests. And should you need anything else, you've only to call me. I'll be staying next door throughout, at your service any hour. Having laid out the basics, Henry tactfully stepped back and waited on Aris's word, a smile on his face. This place is lovely. Luna's voice came from behind Aris. I never imagined the Leaky Cauldron had a room this grand. The girl had just toured the whole suite, and had already settled on which room she wanted. Take whichever you like, Aris told her with a smile. Then I won't stand on ceremony. A smile lit the girl's face. Once Luna had happily disappeared into one of the rooms, Aris turned back to Henry. See to what I asked as soon as you can. I'd like my answer before we leave here. His expression turned abruptly serious. Yes, sir. The smile left Henry's face, and he grew graver even than Aris. With that, he turned and walked out, drawing the door shut behind him. So, what do we do next? Once Henry had gone, Luna reappeared in the living room, a look of anticipation on her face. Next, we read, of course. Aris smiled and began drawing stacks of books from the bag Henry had given him. Before long they'd filled the living room desk. Good idea. Alongside collecting odd little trinkets, reading was one of Luna's own pastimes. The two quickly claimed comfortable seats in the living room and each took up a book. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling across Luna's golden hair, the girl's clear face was faintly flushed in the light, altogether endearing. In that moment there wasn't a sound in the room but the turning of pages, both of them wholly absorbed, the scene like some serene painting of a quiet hour. Aris gently leafed through the old thread-bound volume in his hands, Merlin's Notes, the book he'd taken from the vault at Gringotts. Its contents didn't disappoint him. The characters, traced in blue ink, were strikingly beautiful, and gave off a strange magical power. As Aris studied them closely, a warm, blessing-like sensation washed over him. In truth, most of the profound, cryptic contents were beyond him. Yet somehow, with that strange power to aid him, he seemed to see the book's author standing before him, patiently walking him through the deeper passages. The foundations of wandless casting. The proper use of the power of prophecy. How to commune closely with magical creatures. And the most fundamental framework and principles of ancient magic itself. All of it was set down in the old book, and paired with the explanations of that figure, who was rather like a private tutor made real, everything became simple and clear. Even Aris, who'd never studied a scrap of magic before, could grasp it with ease now. Could this power be born of the traces Merlin left within these pages? Aris marveled inwardly. If so, it's incredible. More than a dozen centuries had passed since Merlin's day, over 1,000 years, and for that magic to be so perfectly preserved was ability enough to earn him the name God of Magic. As Aris read on, the blessing-like feeling grew clearer and clearer, and he found himself unconsciously attempting a few of the wandless techniques. Luna, seated across from him, seemed to sense something and glanced over without quite meaning to. And then she saw a sight that took her breath away, as though she'd stepped, all at once, into some magical paradise. Everything had come alive. Aris sat bathed in sunlight, his eyes still fixed in earnest on the ancient book in his hands. Yet in that moment he seemed lost in some extraordinary state. With a gentle wave of his hand, the books around him drifted up, caught in the pull of his magic, their pages beginning to turn of their own accord. And it wasn't only the books, half the objects in the room seemed to have woken to a will of their own. The waste-bin in the corner sprouted legs and went strolling about the room. Whenever it came upon a stray paper ball, it would even scoop it up and toss it inside itself. The teacup on the table trembled faintly, as though an unseen hand were brewing tea. The cushions on the sofa tussled and played with one another, though they seemed wary of disturbing Aris, turning now and then to glance his way. There were stranger sights besides, enough to leave the usually unflappable Luna staring in astonishment. This is incredible. The girl didn't disturb Aris, but did her best to keep her surprise in check. She rose, stepped carefully around the tussling cushions, caught an alarm clock just as it made to leap off the table, and set it back in place. Then she came to the desk before Aris and quietly watched the cup and kettle shaking away at their tea-making. After a while, the teacup seemed to lose her interest, and her gaze drifted, without her quite meaning it to the boy behind the desk. Aris sat there in the sun, his silver hair catching the light until it shone plainly gold, swaying gently with the ebb and flow of his magic, solemn, almost sacred. Before she knew it, the girl had gone a little dazed. It was an expression she'd never normally show, but the Aris before her held her utterly. Like a top student meeting a gloriously difficult problem, or a poet catching sight of some beautiful verse, she was drawn in without realizing it. Luna simply watched Aris, quiet and unmoving, for the better part of half an hour. Until at last the boy's lashes trembled, as if he were surfacing from that strange state, his right hand, which had been sweeping through the air like a conductor's, slowly lowered, and everything in the room settled back to normal. Only then did she come back to herself. "Luna, why are you looking at me like that?" Aris felt rather awed under it. There was something in the girl's gaze he couldn't quite place. "Did some crumbs stick to my face while I was eating earlier, and I never wiped them off? Do you not know what you just did?" Luna slipped quickly back into her usual airy manner and asked, a little curious. "I was just..." Aris frowned slightly, as if trying to recall. The contents of this book are simply fascinating. After a moment he smiled and shook his head, helpless. He hadn't expected to fall into a state of enlightenment his very first time reading Merlin's Notes. In that state, it had seemed the whole world turned around him, every wish answered with a wave of his hand. In that moment, all his talents had woken at once. The furniture and objects coming to life were, in fact, his almighty shapeshifter and language of nature talents made manifest. It felt like a creator shaping a world of his own imagining. Deeply mysterious, and deeply dangerous. Because he'd only just realized that had any violent thought crossed his mind just then, the whole suite would likely have been ground to powder under his own magic. And the girl before him, of course, would have been hurt with it. Still, the gains from entering that state were enormous. Aris could feel, clearly, that his command of his magic had grown far more assured. If his control had been 10% when he'd first merged with Merlin's talent, then now it stood at 50, at least. That 40% leap was nothing to dismiss. Even an adult wizard fresh out of Hogwarts likely didn't exceed 60% control over his own magic. A wizard who could command more than 80% had already surpassed 9 in 10 of the wizarding world, capable of feats most others couldn't dream of. And past 90% lay a whole new realm. Creating a new spell would be effortless there, mastering powerful, forbiddingly difficult magic, simple. The first Dark Lord Grindelwald's famed skill, Fiendfire, was a case in point. That advanced flame magic demanded not only immense raw power but extraordinarily fine control, otherwise, across the whole of the Fantastic Beasts films in Aris's old life, Grindelwald wouldn't have been the only one able to wield Fiendfire with such ease. Merlin's notes. Luna peered curiously at the ancient book in Aris's hand. It still lay open. She'd barely taken a glance, barely made out a single character in it clearly, before a wave of dizziness hit her, and she quickly looked away. This book is so strange. I can't even read it. She spoke with lingering unease, looking at Aris with a touch of worry. Don't you feel anything odd when you read it? No. Aris was taken aback. If anything, I think it explains everything in wonderful detail. He was genuinely surprised. He hardly thought Luna would lie. There's a story here. Is there something wrong with the book? But I felt nothing amiss reading it. Or could it be some ancient forbidden magic, one that only lets those it's approved of read its contents? After turning it over carefully for a while, Aris settled on an answer. That's likely the only explanation. This is Merlin's book, after all, not just anyone could read it. Otherwise it would never have sat in the Shafik vault all this time. He already had a guess. It's probably because I've merged Merlin's talents. Merlin's book would hardly guard itself against one who carries Merlin's own gifts. That was the most reasonable read of it. Never mind, this is your secret. There's no need to explain it to me. Seeing Aris deep in thought, Luna spoke up suddenly, a smile returning to her face. But do be more careful next time you read it. I can't shake the feeling there's something dangerous in that book, maybe not something an 11-year-old wizard ought to be handling. All right, I understand. Warmth spread through Aris's chest. Short as their time together had been, he could feel Luna's concern for him plainly, and it touched him. Aris, from now on, may I call you Big Brother? Luna's words caught him off guard. I've always thought it would be a lovely thing, to have a big brother. There was a clear thread of nervousness in Luna's eyes, though her tone stayed that familiar, offhand one, as if she were simply stating something perfectly ordinary. Aris broke into a smile, reached out to gently touch the girl's long golden hair, and said, in earnest, of course. Late that night, Aris, who had been reading for hours, lay on the bed, studying the system panel hovering in his mind. After the enlightenment that afternoon, his magic power had risen from D tier to C tier, no small jump. The panel displayed the exact value behind the tier, raised the value, and the tier rose to match. Ordinarily, first years fresh to Hogwarts sat somewhere between G tier and E tier, depending on talent, while adult wizards could reach B. Most of the Ministry's elite Aurors, for instance, were A tier. As for the stronger Dark Lords, or a master like Dumbledore, they might reach S tier or beyond. Right after merging his talent, Aris had already been at D tier, far past his peers. And his power was still in a period of rapid growth, faster still with magic potions on hand to raise the value directly. So after the afternoon's breakthrough, reaching C-tier didn't strike him as strange at all. He could feel it clearly now, too, his magic thrumming, extraordinarily active. And with his current control, he had only to learn a spell to wield it almost at will. Even more advanced spells, he could adapt to and cast quickly. This was the power that came of merging Merlin's talent. I've built up 1,000 points. Time for a draw. Aris closed the attribute panel and tapped the roulette wheel. Spend 100 academic points for a draw. Just do a 10 pull. Aris wasted no time and threw all 1,000 points in. Redeeming a magic potion cost 1,000 points a bottle. At this stage, the draw was still the better value. The system was surely stocked with rewards waiting to be pulled. As the points drained, the wheel began to spin, the colorful roulette blurring into a cool, swirling vortex. Before long, dazzling light burst out of it. 5 white, 2 green, 1 blue, 1 purple, 1 gold. Aris's eyes brightened faintly. Is a 10 pull guaranteed a top prize? I actually landed a gold legendary. He quickly checked the rewards. Gold galleons times 5. Of all things, gold's the one thing I've got the most of right now. Low-level spell learning EXP pack times 2. An EXP pack? What in the world is this? Aris used both low-level spell learning EXP packs on a whim. A ray of light rose up, and his system panel shifted. Beneath the special talents section, a new subjects panel appeared. Charms, Novice, 99 100ths. 2 packs had pushed his charms learning straight to Novice, right up against the cap. But that's odd, why isn't it maxed? Puzzled, Aris checked the details. The host has not yet mastered any spell. Spell learning cannot advance further. Ah, so that's it. Aris was speechless. He'd spent the whole afternoon on Merlin's notes and hadn't read anything else, so he genuinely hadn't yet mastered a single spell from the standard curriculum. At the thought, Aris reached over and picked up a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, from the bedside table, the one he'd brought into the room earlier, meaning to read before sleep. He hadn't expected it to come in handy quite so soon. He flipped it open and skimmed, and soon found a simple spell. Wingardium Leviosa. Wandless casting. After no more than a glance, Aris cast the first spell he'd ever learned. In the corner of the room, a coat lifted lightly as he swept his right hand, drifting in a circle beneath the ceiling. The next instant, light surged through his mind, and the system chimed at once. Congratulations, Charms Learning advanced to Elementary. Aris glanced at the panel. Charms, Elementary, 1/500th. Straight up a full grade, sure enough. As the light of the upgrade sank into his mind, Aris could feel a distinct clarity spreading through it, knowledge of spells imprinting itself, the techniques and insights of elementary charms pouring in. It wasn't profound knowledge, elementary as it was, but it greatly deepened his experience in casting. Take the levitation charm just now, first time or no, there'd been no resistance to it, no friction, it had come out clean, all in one motion. That was the effect of talent and magic control working together. If he cast it again now, Aris was certain he could do better still, could steer the floating object's path precisely, move it wherever he wished. Having sorted out what the EXP packs did, Aris turned to the remaining 2 rewards. This time the purple tier item wasn't a magic potion, but a book, a skill book. Meditation method, used to learn meditation. Effect, slowly raises magic value, strengthens magic control. And orders one's magic properties. Magic properties? Aris's mind stirred. He'd seen the term in Merlin's notes. Over time, everyone's magic slowly evolved a particular property, or characteristic. A wizard who leaned long and often on dark magic, for instance, would inevitably have his soul eroded, his magic's properties tainted, his very temperament might change. Others were born with an affinity for, say, explosion magic, or ice, or healing. All these were differences born of differing magic properties. Aris was keenly interested in the subject, and had studied the passages on it in Merlin's notes with care. Meditation could not only raise magic power and sharpen control, but order one's magic properties besides, a precious effect indeed. If Aris wanted to study dark magic, say, he could use meditation to continually settle his own magic and so purge the corrupting influence on his soul. A remarkable skill. Purple tear is honestly an insult to it. Aris couldn't help a flicker of feeling. But before long, the last reward, the gold tier 1, drew his eye. If purple tear is already this strong, what does gold hold? His gaze fell on the object giving off golden light. From the outside, it looked like an unhatched egg. Am I about to have a pet? Aris stared blankly at the dragon egg's description, struck by a distinctly strange feeling. A certain series. A dragon girl. Why has the system's reward style suddenly changed? Besides, a dragon takes centuries to reach adulthood. Would I even be alive by then? I'd have long since turned to a handful of dust. How am I even supposed to take a reward like this? Aris was genuinely bewildered. But never mind, let's hatch it first. Having a dragon for a pet is definitely cool. From today, I'm a man with a dragon. So, should I be called Dragon Dad, then? Having read the hatching instructions, Aris squeezed a drop of blood from between his fingers and let it fall onto the egg. Oh, blood again. Squeezing it out of a fingertip stings. Grumbling to himself, Aris looked at the faintly glowing egg with a touch of anticipation. As his blood merged into the egg, a magical light enveloped it whole. With a sharp click, brilliance burst from within, then drew inward, forming a strange contract rune on Aris's arm. The rune glowed red, its shape like a hexagram traced by some ancient brush, though with subtle differences, faint dragon scale marks running along its edges. Aris had never seen a rune like it. Its function was somewhat akin to this world's blood pacts, but with clear distinctions of its own. Once the pact was sealed, the dragon, upon hatching, would become Aris's most loyal companion, bound to him in life and death, of one mind with him. Crack. Crack. As the moments passed, more and more fissures spread across the egg. Before long a little head pushed through the shell and poked out. The little thing was terribly cute, a dark red body, 2 small bumps rising from the top of its head like dragon horns not yet grown in. Its face was round, its eyes large. When it opened its mouth, magical light spilled out and scattered like sparks. Wah! The first time the little red dragon laid eyes on Aris, it let out a spoiled little whimper. Then it opened its mouth and, in 2 or 3 gulps, swallowed the rest of the shell whole. With every scrap of shell eaten, the little dragon's strength plainly grew. It sprang up off the table and clung to Aris's clothes. You little thing, thinking of running off the moment you're out? Aris found he genuinely adored the little red dragon, it was cute enough to rival even Luna. He gently stroked its head and murmured, I'll call you Iris, then. Aris couldn't quite say why, but a Japanese anime from his old life had flashed suddenly through his mind, one with a dark dragon that could take the form of a girl, so very cute. The name seemed to suit the red dragon perfectly. Wah! The little dragon seemed to love the name. It squinted its eyes, nuzzled Aris's palm, and let out another affectionate little coo. Just as Aris was wondering where to keep Iris, the system spoke, right on cue. Pet system activated. Pet space unlocked simultaneously. The prompt solved his worry outright. He'd been fretting over whether keeping a dragon at his side would be too conspicuous. Trust the system. A full one-stop service. Off you go, little one, rest for now. Aris recalled the little dragon into the pet space, then opened the pet panel. Pet name, Iris. Grade, SSS. Growth stage, infant, newborn. Magic power, C tier. Skills, breath, incomplete, dragon tongue magic, locked. Looking over the little dragon's stats, Aris couldn't help clicking his tongue in quiet astonishment. It's only just been born, and its magic is already C-tier. That talent is genuinely terrifying. Even fiercer than Merlin's. It really is true that some are born to make the rest of us despair. Thank goodness she's my pet. If a creature like this were on the enemy's side, then even with Merlin's talent, I'm not sure I could win. Aris drew a deep breath and closed the pet panel. The shock Iris had given him kept sleep at bay for a long while. In the end he simply sat up again, took up the standard spellbook beside him, and began to read. Tonight, it seemed, was fated to be another sleepless one. Early the next morning, Aris walked out of his room in a daze, a pair of dark circles under his eyes. He'd slept only 2 hours, but he hadn't forgotten he had something important to see to today. Not the wand, of course, it had only been a day, and there was no way Ollivander could have finished it that fast. It was the matter of the Barton family. Aris had just splashed water on his face and come round a little when a knock sounded at the suite door, right on time. "Young master, are you awake?" Henry's voice came from outside. "Come in." Aris's face was serious, his voice low. The door opened. Henry was in formal dress, that familiar get-up, goatee, bowler hat, a respectful look about him. "Good morning, Mr. Henry. Is it all done?" "Good morning, young master." Henry bowed slightly, then handed over a document wrapped in a parchment folder. "As you instructed, here is the information on every member of our Barton family, along with a list of those who've schemed against the Shafik holdings in recent years, and what's generally known about them. Time was short, so gathering more detailed information may take a while yet. My apologies, young master." Henry seemed a little nervous just then. "It's all right." Aris nodded, understanding. He'd asked Henry to collect the necessary information so he might grasp the Shafik family's present situation. To have sorted this much within a single day was thoughtful of Henry indeed. As for finer details, he was willing to wait a little longer. "Mr. Henry, I asked you to gather information on the Barton family's own members as well. Any objection to that?" Aris looked at him and asked. "None whatsoever." Henry answered without hesitation. The loyalty of the Barton family will never waver, whatever the reason. Anything the young master wishes to know, nothing will be hidden. His expression grew graver still, as though he'd have dug out his own heart to show Aris if he could. "Good. Thank you for your hard work." Aris nodded with a smile. At that moment, the door to Luna's room opened. The girl clearly wasn't fully awake yet, she padded out in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Big brother, good morning." "Morning, Luna." A smile crossed Aris's face. Seeing the two of them greet each other so naturally, Henry tactfully withdrew from the room. The moment the door closed, his heart brimmed with feeling and relief. The young master truly is remarkable. Such charm, and so young, the Shafik family is sure to rise again in his generation. "Did I sleep in, big brother?" Looking at the closed door, Luna tilted her head and asked Aris. "No, your timing's perfect." Aris smiled at the girl and explained, "Henry had something to tell me, but we're done now." "Oh, good." Luna laughed and headed for the bathroom. "Maybe we can have breakfast together." "Of course. I happen to be hungry myself." Aris glanced after her, then turned and tucked the documents Henry had brought into the desk drawer. 10 minutes later, the girl came out in a white lapelled long-sleeved dress and a blue knitted jacket. "You look far livelier." Aris couldn't help ruffling her golden hair, and said with a smile, "Come on, let's head down for breakfast." "All right, big brother." Luna nodded, seemingly used to Aris's touch by now and not minding it at all. Before long the two of them had gone down to the pub's ground floor, where, all at once, a commotion rose up ahead, faint exclamations threaded through it. "Harry Potter, it really is Harry Potter." He's back. I knew he'd come back. Mr. Potter, welcome back. Harry Potter, a pleasure to meet you. Reaching the pub's main room, Aris saw a knot of people crowded around the bar, and in the middle of them a boy about his own age. The boy looked a little thin, his hair somewhat untidy, his clothes unremarkable, though no one there was paying that any mind. Every eye was fixed on the boy's forehead, where a scar shaped like a bolt of lightning stood out. He was the protagonist of the wizarding world in this era, the great boy who lived, Harry Potter. Looks like we've run into Harry Potter, Luna said at Aris's ear, in that same familiar tone, without much curiosity or surprise to it. Going by the timing, he must be off to Hogwarts too. You know him as well? Aris couldn't help asking. It seemed the only boy ever to survive the mysterious Voldemort really was famous throughout the wizarding world. He made the front page of the Daily Prophet the day he was born, and he's been mentioned in the wizarding world often in the years since. Luna nodded and explained, Father's spoken of him to me too. Though I think becoming famous so young may not be a good thing for him. And he became famous through a sad past, at that. Aris nodded, then said with a smile, it seems Luna understands this boy better than everyone else in the tavern. It's only a reasonable guess. Luna gave a light shrug. At the bar, Harry Potter, ringed by the crowd, looked a little nervous, an awkward expression on his face, plainly he'd never been through a scene like this before. Just then a burly figure beside the counter waved the crowd back. All right, young Harry's still got to get to Diagon Alley for his school things, so let's leave it there for today. The figure was enormous, easily 3 meters tall, his voice rough at the edges. The moment Aris saw the man, he knew him, Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. A man with giant's blood. Come on, let's go order some food. Aris took Luna's hand and made for the counter. By now Harry Potter, brought over by Hagrid, was speaking with a male wizard in a turban who talked with a stammer. Aris watched the man quietly. If he remembered right, that wizard would be Harry's greatest adversary in his first year at Hogwarts, Professor Quirrell, host to the lingering spirit of Voldemort. Little Harry would never imagine that Professor Quirrell, who seemed to stammer, who even showed him a measure of respect, would nearly cost him his life. Of course, Harry Potter, wrapped in a protagonist's aura, wouldn't die so easily, there was no chance he'd truly fall into Quirrell's hands. Perhaps it's all just as Dumbledore said. Fate. Hello, Mr. Tom, 2 breakfasts, please. Aris had no wish for any contact with Harry or Quirrell just now, and he wasn't fool enough to reveal his identity while things were still uncertain. Harry Potter had a protagonist's aura, and could claw his way out of one desperate corner after another, Aris didn't. In fact, having inherited the Shoffic fortune, he had troubles enough of his own, and no intention of meddling in the boy who lives business of slaying monsters and leveling up. Right away, Mr. Shoffic. Old Tom plainly knew Aris, he spoke respectfully and turned at once to prepare the food in the back. Hello, Harry Potter. As Aris ordered, Luna happened to pass by Harry and greeted him politely. Hello. Harry Potter still seemed a little on edge, he probably took Luna for one of the wizards who worshipped the boy who lived's fame. Just then Hagrid looked over at Aris. Hello there, lad, are you the Shoffic descendant who's turned up out of nowhere? A note of curiosity touched his eyes. Seeing Aris's puzzled look, he quickly explained, sorry, that was a bit forward of me. I'm Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. It's Dumbledore, he mentioned your name to me in passing, so I remembered it. Most Hogwarts first years get an orientation from one of our teachers. I gather you've already met Professor McGonagall. At Hagrid's explanation, Aris finally understood how the big man knew him. Yes, Professor McGonagall and I had a lovely chat. Aris nodded politely. Well, if you set aside the faintly resentful look she gave me on her way out, I suppose it was a very pleasant chat indeed. A Shoffic descendant? Professor Quirrell was looking at Aris now too, something unreadable in his eyes. At the same time, the crowd that had dispersed turned their attention back this way, and a low ripple of muttering rose up. A Shafik descendant? Could the rumors be true? Someone from that house appeared again. Good heavens! A boy inheriting a fortune he couldn't spend in a lifetime, no telling whether that's a blessing or a curse. I hear a good many wizarding families are ready to make their move. Seems they've got their eyes on that unthinkable wealth. Keep your voice down, those families won't want this getting out. That poor lad. No knowing what trouble's in store for him. As the muttering spread through the pub, more and more eyes turned to Aris, and their expressions shifted from curiosity to something like pity. To their minds, perhaps, there was no way a boy like Aris could hold on to such holdings, and his end would surely be a grim one. That's enough. Hagrid's gaze swept the room, and his booming voice smothered the talk at once. As long as Mr. Shafik is at Hogwarts, Headmaster Dumbledore will see to his safety. It's no concern of yours. With Hagrid weighing in, the other wizards finally fell quiet and turned back to their drinks. That done, Hagrid looked to Harry Potter, who had stayed silent. Harry, Mr. Shafik here is off to study at Hogwarts, same as you. I thought the two of you might get acquainted early. Harry had been watching the wizards discuss Aris, but at the sudden mention of his name he quickly turned. Oh, hello. I'm Harry. Harry Potter. The boy put out his hand to Aris, wiping it on his clothes first, without quite thinking about it. Aris extended his own. Hello. I'm Aris. Aris Shafik. The two shook hands lightly, then politely let go. Forgive me, it may be a bit forward of me, but I'd like to say it anyway. I think I can understand a little of how you feel. I hope you won't take what they say to heart. Harry said it to Aris in earnest, his tone sincere. He was just an ordinary boy from London, and life hadn't been especially kind to him. Now he'd been thrust into a magical world, where it seemed his very identity was bound up with some extraordinary past, which had made him the focus of the entire wizarding world. It left him bewildered, and hungry to prove himself, and deeply conflicted with it all. He'd thought Aris might be facing the same thing, which was why he'd spoken up at their very first meeting. Thank you. But I haven't taken their words to heart. Aris was a little surprised, he truly hadn't expected Harry Potter to say such a thing to him. Still, for Aris, everything had its solution. Hagrid was right about one thing, as long as he was at Hogwarts, his safety was more or less assured. As for handling those who coveted the family's holdings, with enough strength, any scheme becomes a joke. And I happen to have the means to become strong enough. So he'd never once worried about the schemers circling the Shafik fortune. Afterward, Aris introduced Luna to Harry and Hagrid. Nice to meet you. At that, Harry finally smiled, truly, from the heart, for the first time. Perhaps it was simply the relief of meeting others his own age, ones who'd be his classmates. Aris, for his part, hadn't imagined his first meeting with this world's protagonist would come in some shabby pub. After a few brief words, Hagrid led Harry off toward the wall that opened onto Diagon Alley. Aris glanced again toward where Quirrell had been standing, and found the man had slipped away at some point, he couldn't say when. That one, did he seem to have some other interest in me? Aris had caught the unreadable look Quirrell gave him earlier. Given the man was host to the Dark Lord's remnant soul, Aris had been watching him quietly all along. Even so, he couldn't work out what that look had meant. I only hope he won't come after me. Aris shook his head. If the Dark Lord's remnant really has designs on me, then there's no help for it, I'll meet soldiers with soldiers, and dam water with earth. But first, the most important thing is to build my strength as fast as I possibly can. Harry, you'd best remember how to get to Diagon Alley from here. It'll come in handy later. Like so, 3 bricks up from the bin, 2 across, and tap 3 times. Since Aris was seated at a table not far from the wall to Diagon Alley, he caught snatches of Hagrid and Harry's conversation. He didn't dwell on it, though, and settled in to eat his breakfast with Luna in earnest. Today might well be a day Harry Potter remembers deeply, just as yesterday was for me, my first time in Diagon Alley. The door to the fantastical magical world was, at that very moment, opening before the boy who'd survived catastrophe. "Big brother, are you all right?" "HM. Why do you ask?" Aris looked up at Luna, a little puzzled. Luna's expression was serious, though her tone stayed airy and offhand, as if she were forever half in a dream. "I understand how you're feeling right now. Mom said that what belongs to you will find its way back to you, and that it's not your fault. You needn't be confused, or afraid. Whatever comes, Father and I will stand by you and face it together. I promise." Only then did Aris realize. Luna must have taken the wizard's muttering to heart just now, that's why she's comforting me this way. He had to admit it, she really was a remarkably perceptive, kind-hearted girl. Warmth welled up in Aris's chest. He smiled and said softly, "Luna, don't worry. I'm not confused, and I'm not afraid. I know exactly where I stand, and I know how to deal with those problems. It makes me happy that you'd stand by my side without a second thought, now, and in the years to come." He paused. "But Luna, I'm your big brother. So whatever happens, all you need do is stand behind me. A little sister shouldn't have to protect her big brother, should she?" Listening to him, the girl set down the bread in her hand, her eyes gone red without her noticing. "Big brother," she called softly, and then a bright smile broke across her face. "A lot of people call me Loony. They don't seem to want much to do with me, but I've never minded." She paused. "Only now I suddenly mind a little. Big brother, we'll always be together from now on, won't we?" Something tender rose in Aris's eyes without his meaning it to. He gently touched the girl's hair and said, in earnest, "Of course. You won't leave all of a sudden, the way my mother did?" "I won't. I know Mom and I will meet again one day, but big brother, I'd rather not wait for that. And I don't want you to leave suddenly either." Seeing the girl on the verge of tears, Aris felt for the first time that perhaps she wasn't as strong as he'd thought. She was, after all, only a 10-year-old girl. It was natural enough for her to have her fragile moments. She'd simply never had anyone to share those small, quiet thoughts with before. And now, she did. Aris drew a deep breath and made his solemn promise. "No. I promise. Luna, are you reading Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them?" "Yes." "Why, big brother? Then do you know where one might find a Thunderbird?" I don't think I've seen any particular record of that in the book." The little girl flipped quickly through the pages. "It's all right, just tell me once you found it." Aris's voice came unhurried. "Congratulations, your question successfully stumped the respondent. 200 academic points obtained." For the next 2 days, Aris and Luna kept mostly to the suite and didn't go out, even their meals were brought up by Tom. Aris read the whole time, and, of course, never let the 3-question daily quest slip. So, to answer his questions, Luna had been kept thoroughly busy those 2 days, reading and hunting down information. Just now, for instance, Aris had known perfectly well that Luna had only just picked up a copy of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, yet he'd still put a far from simple question to her. To find the answer, Luna would likely have to spend the whole day working through Newt Scamander's thick tome on magical creatures. Of course, there was a reason Aris was working poor little Luna so hard. If you want to stand alongside your big brother, you have to be ready to face danger at any time. Aris had said it to Luna in a very serious tone. He'd done it not because he truly wanted Luna's help dealing with those who coveted the Shafik holdings. Honestly, Aris didn't take those people seriously. But he knew well enough that as long as Voldemort, the faceless man, still drew breath, the whole wizarding world would never be safe. Aris had no wish to make arrangements too far in advance. The inertial pull of history correcting itself was a troublesome thing to fight against, more troublesome, even, than facing Voldemort head-on. Right now he held the advantage of knowing the plot, and the eventual ending, for all its regrets, was on the whole not a bad one. If he began meddling with events now, then once the butterfly's wings beat, things could easily spin out of control. In a straight fight, given a little time, I've no fear of Voldemort. What I fear is that the old snake realizes he's no match for me and slips into the shadows to lay his own plans. If that happens, even I can't promise to keep everything in hand, and something I'll regret might come to pass. So he meant to teach Luna a few skills in advance, at the very least, to let her master some means of protecting herself as soon as possible. Wand or no wand, memorizing a few spells and gathering more knowledge could only do her good. Iris, you're a dragon. Stop thinking about bread all the time. Aris looked, a little helpless, at the little thing rubbing against his feet. The little red dragon, Iris, didn't seem to care for staying in the pet space. There was nothing for it, Aris could only let her out to play now and then. Iris's appearance had startled Luna, but delighted her enormously too, and boy and dragon had quickly struck up a deep friendship. Luna often had Tom bring up food, though most of it ended up in the little red dragon's belly. Aris had stressed again and again not to feed Iris too much bread lest she stuff herself, but the girl still loved doing it. Strangely, Iris's stomach seemed a bottomless pit, she could eat any amount at all. It's all right, big brother. Iris, come here. Hearing the fuss, Luna lifted her eyes from the book, picked up a piece of bread, and set it on the sofa beside her. The little red dragon flapped its wings excitedly, sprang onto the sofa, and set to happily eating, nuzzling Luna's palm all the while. There was another thing that made Aris happy. Ordinarily, Luna kept to that airy, dreamy state of hers, seeming half elsewhere every day. But sometimes, perhaps because they'd grown close, she'd let slip her attachment to Aris, her reliance on him, even acting a little spoiled now and then. It made Aris feel, for a moment, that he might have unlocked a whole new version of Luna Lovegood. The experience could only be called a very fine one. In the living room, Aris watched Luna and Iris play together and shook his head, helpless. Just then came a sudden knock at the door. "Young master, is now a good time?" Henry's voice came through, as if wary of disturbing him. "It's fine. Come in." Aris recalled the little red dragon to the pet space. He'd rather not too many people knew of her yet, she might well become a crucial, powerful trump card for him. Then he gave a light wave toward the door, and it swung quietly open. That was the fruit of his 2 days of magic training, a simple application of raw magical power, not quite a proper spell, but very convenient, an ability that could only be managed once one's control of magic reached a certain level. "Young master, word from Ollivander. The wand is finished. Though he'd like you to come in person, he says he wants to test its performance." Aris's eyes lit up and he rose at once. "No problem. Let's go now." "That's wonderful, big brother. You can finally have your own wand." Luna had watched Aris's fearsome wandless talent many times over the past 2 days, but to a young wizard, a wand meant more than a mere casting tool, it was a spiritual anchor, and the mark of a true wizard. Before long the three of them left the leaky cauldron. Entering Diagon Alley once more, they arrived at Ollivander's. The moment they reached the door, it opened of its own accord, plainly Ollivander had been waiting for Aris. "You've come at last." From behind the counter, Ollivander looked up at the boy, then hurried to a small shelf behind him and drew out a slim silver box. Its lid bore a pattern in fine golden lines, beautiful and solemn both, an angel, perhaps. Aris didn't pay the details much mind, he was far more interested in what lay inside. Ollivander carefully opened the box, lifted out the wand, and spoke slowly, his voice faintly excited. "Deathless wood, thestral tail hair, 14.5 inches, moderately firm, and immensely powerful." The wand was a dark silver, frosted in texture, its handle ringed with lines like tree rings that gave the palm more grip and kept it from slipping free. The instant Aris took it, a most extraordinary feeling rose in his chest, like a meeting of minds. And then gray and white fell over him at once, like the churning breath between life and death itself. It was the very embodiment of life and death, a phenomenon extraordinarily rare. Astonishing. I've made so many wands, and never once seen a sight so stunning. Ollivander's mystic murmur rose again, as though he were beholding the most magnificent vista in all the world. This wand seems made for you. I dare say there's no one else on earth worthy of it. Mr. Ollivander, thank you. Aris felt the joy and surging power flowing from the wand and spoke sincerely. With his sense for magic, he could feel plainly that this wand would greatly heighten both his casting speed and his power, by at least 30%. It's no more than my duty, Mr. Shafik. Ollivander bowed, his tone still faintly excited. If anything, I should be thanking you. It was you who let me craft this one-of-a-kind wand. I believe its power rivals that of the legendary Elder Wand, and in how well it suits its wielder, it surpasses even that. He paused. I've always thought a wand like this might one day make you famous throughout the wizarding world. And when it does, my shop will naturally share in the glory. Perhaps. Aris smiled. Now then, Mr. Shafik. Ollivander gave a sudden wave, and several humanoid puppets appeared in the shop. These are what I use to test a wand's performance. They possess very strong magical resistance, and can precisely measure a wand's various properties. If you're willing. Of course, I'm rather curious myself. Aris quickly grasped what he meant. Testing a wand involved more than touching the wood, feeling the magic in the core, and measuring its length. More precise tests naturally covered the wand's power and its magic conduction properties too, and Ollivander's puppets were the most professional tools for the job. Aris didn't hesitate long, and cast at once. Stupefy. A silver-white light shot from the wand in Aris's hand and struck one of the puppets dead on. Then came a violent, dull boom. Everyone stared as the puppet was blasted several meters back, a clear mark of powerful magic still branded on its chest. Offensive power, Estir. Ollivander wrote the figure down without hesitation. I hadn't expected that alongside your astonishing talent, Mr. Shafik, you'd have such a gift for learning as well. That was a flawless stunning charm. You're too kind. Aris smiled. Just then he was a little surprised himself. After casting, he could feel clearly that this wand had boosted his magic by at least 50%. That's frightening. At full power with this wand, even with only C-tier magic, I could likely go toe-to-toe with a B-tier wizard. Before Ollivander could prompt him, Aris cast again, decisively. Episki. The puppet that had just flown backward was struck again, and this time the blast mark on its chest healed rapidly, until in moments there was no trace of the earlier stunner at all. Healing power, Estir. Ollivander recorded another figure, excited. Henry and Luna watched Aris's display, surprise and happy smiles on their faces. They'd all guessed Aris might have real talent, but hadn't imagined it ran this deep. In their hearts, the stronger Aris proved, the prouder they were. Petrificus totalis. The just-healed puppet was hit once more. In the next second a distinct grayish-white spread across its torso, then flashed out over its whole body in an instant. Ollivander strode over and gave the petrified surface a light poke with his wand, surprise crossing his face again. Binding power, Estir. He looked at Aris, his face flushed with excitement. Incredible. And now, the final item. Ollivander came toward Aris, serious now. This time, please use your full strength. You needn't cast any spell, simply swing your wand the very moment the first thought comes to you. Aris considered, then nodded slightly. He didn't know what Ollivander meant to test this time, but he was curious. What would happen, just waving the wand on instinct? Aris gently closed his eyes, willing himself calm, thinking nothing, doing nothing. He stood like that, quiet, for a full minute, then suddenly opened his eyes and raised the wand in his right hand. In that instant, the lights throughout the shop dimmed. A grayish-white aura spread over the puppet's body, and in a mere 3 seconds, the test puppet, wrought from powerful magical materials, crumbled to ash bit by bit, as though it had weathered 1,000 years of wind and rain. By the time Aris came back to himself, there was nothing on the floor but a heap of dust. Everyone was stunned, Ollivander most of all. He had run more wand tests than anyone, seen the most that could be seen, but the sight before him, he genuinely couldn't fathom. Like some variant of the power of death. He murmured. As though the trace of some ancient magic lingers. I don't understand it. I truly don't. Frowning, he looked at Aris again. You really cast no spell? No. Aris nodded. In truth, he was a little surprised himself just then. Because I seem to have seen a scene like this in Merlin's notes. Grey magic, the power of death governed by time and space. Like the trace of 1,000 years of wind and sand grinding all to nothing, or endless space, folded and torn down to its smallest particles. A power simply beyond human ability to contend with. Time. Space. Why do I have a magic property like this? Aris was puzzled. Merlin didn't seem to possess any such special talent. Which means this power wasn't granted by Merlin's talent card, it came from somewhere else. In the end, Ollivander still couldn't set down an exact result for the test's final item. He could only make an estimate, giving the magic conduction column an S. It was a property even he had never seen before, so gauging exactly how far the wand enhanced it was difficult. All told, it looks tremendously impressive. So, an S it is. At last, Ollivander recorded the wand's overall evaluation. In fact, every wand Ollivander sold leaned one way or another. Some wands were tremendously powerful, so their healing and control were naturally weaker, others healed well but fell short on control and force, still others balanced two abilities at the cost of a third. Without exception, though, there was always an emphasis. The same was true of wizards, which was precisely why wands chose their wizards, and why a wizard was so often ill-matched to a wand not his own. It was the first time Ollivander had ever seen a wand this balanced across every ability, and this strong in each, a thing that should have been impossible. Yet here it was. And so Ollivander gave the wand his highest overall grade, SSS. Mr. Ollivander, I'd like to ask you something. Once the wand test was over, an idea occurred to Aris, and he looked to the wand maker. Please, go ahead, Mr. Shafik. Ollivander was plainly very patient with anything Aris had to say, whether for the boy's identity, or because he'd never met a young wizard of such formidable talent. It's this. Aris gathered his thoughts. I've read a few books on wand making and theory these past days, and I've had some ideas. You've made a great many wands, so you'll know each one has its own character, even a measure of will of its own. Which is why you always say the wand chooses the wizard, yes. Just so. Ollivander nodded firmly. To hold thoughts this deep, it seems Mr. Shafik has read rather more than a book or two. He looked at Aris with a trace of admiration. So, what else would you like to know? What I want to know is. Aris paused, then asked, is it possible to make a wand with a consciousness of its own? A wand like that could help correct its owner's spellwork mid-cast, raising the success rate, and even, with the owner's leave, cast on its own. At the question, surprise showed in Ollivander's eyes. That you'd think of this at all, Mr. Shafik, you truly do surprise me. He hesitated a moment. In fact, my family has made wands for generations, and we too once tried to develop a clever wand, one with an independent consciousness, just as you describe. But it's no easy thing, plainly, for it touches on the study of the soul. And the soul is taboo even in the wizarding world. What's more, if a wand of fully autonomous consciousness truly were made, there'd be still greater problems to weigh. A wand like that would stand a real chance of turning on its owner, or slipping away in the dead of night and vanishing. So our attempts were forced to a halt, and no one ever raised the idea again. Beside them, Henry looked at Aris helplessly and offered, carefully, "In truth, young master, I think you may be overthinking this. Even if such a wand were developed, the ministry would likely do everything in its power to suppress it, it would never see release. Because a wand like that could well challenge the authority of the whole ministry of magic." "Just so." Ollivander nodded in agreement. "That was another reason we abandoned the research." "I see." Aris nodded, understanding. "Then what about a wand that can cast spells automatically? Something, rather like automatic firearms in the Muggle world, flip a switch, and it rapidly looses a preset spell. Is a wand like that possible?" At this, Ollivander smiled, an utterly certain look on his face. "That's more impossible still. Casting a spell requires the wizard's own magic, and more than that, the union of the casting motion, the incantation, and a strong emotion behind it. If we truly built an automatic caster, I think it could manage a few feeble sparks at best, or spit out a burst of harmless fireworks. And of all of it, the most crucial thing is the immediacy of the cast. As far as I know, apart from certain curses and utility spells, very few offensive or defensive spells can be stored for any length of time. As for storing several spells at once in a single object, able to be released, interrupted, even replenished at will, that's more impossible yet." Aris frowned slightly at that. But just then Luna spoke up from the side. "Perhaps we could try to find a material that stores spells and lets them be used again." "We've thought of that too, of course, my girl." Ollivander gave Luna an approving look, then shook his head at once. "But as far as I know, the whole wizarding world has yet to discover any such material. A thing like that would be vanishingly rare, near impossible to find." As Ollivander finished, the shop fell into a brief silence. Even the clever Luna was at a loss for what to say. Perhaps some things simply weren't worth their considering just now. She glanced at Aris, and found the boy still frowning faintly. After a long moment, just as Henry was about to remind his young master it was time to go, Aris suddenly spoke. "Mr. Ollivander, what if we added some kind of magic array? I read in a book that certain wizards in ancient times could use magic arrays to store magic within a weapon or object, then activate it when needed to form a powerful spell. Weapons and tools like these were called magic implements or spirit implements, by the ancient wizards and magical creatures. Legend has it King Arthur once wielded such a weapon, made for him by Merlin, the god of magic himself, and immensely powerful." "And where did you read tales like these?" Ollivander shook his head, amused. "King Arthur's sword, Merlin the god of magic, those are only myth and legend. Even if such a spell-storing array truly existed, it was lost long ago. Even ancient magic survives only in the smallest fragments. And most of what remains rests in the hands of a few ancient wizarding families, very few ever lay eyes on it." At that, Ollivander went still for a moment, then looked at Aris seriously. It had suddenly struck him, wasn't the Shafik family an ancient house of long and deep history? Could the boy before him truly have seen such an array, in some old book? "Anything's possible, isn't it?" Aris smiled. In truth, he had seen that kind of magic array before, recorded in Merlin's notes, along with a detailed account of King Arthur's sword. "Perhaps I could reproduce it, or improve on it, from what's set down in those notes. Build a wand that truly casts on its own, like a gun. And if a wand like that were actually made, what would you even call it? A Gatling wand?" Ollivander, meanwhile, had grown a little excited. "Mr. Shafik, if you truly know of such an array, please, let me take part in this great work. I promise I can be of some help. I'll be in touch, if the chance arises." Aris made no firm commitment. He took Luna's hand and gave Ollivander a wave. "Well, thank you for your advice, Mr. Ollivander. That's all for today. Listening to the systems chime at his ear, Aris smiled and turned to go. There was still a month to go before term began on September 1st. Aris had originally meant to return to the Lovegoods after collecting his wand from Ollivander, but he'd since changed his mind. Over the coming month he planned to read every book Henry had gathered and absorb all manner of magical knowledge, especially potions, alchemy, and the magic arrays mentioned in Merlin's notes. With the 3 miraculous talents the system had granted him, photographic memory, accelerated thinking, and speed reading, Aris would have no trouble teaching himself the contents of those books. The only thing he lacked was the practical, hands-on side. So he had other plans. Big brother, you've all but turned this place into a laboratory. Since Aris was still staying at the pub, Luna naturally had no wish to go home. Xenophilius was far too busy. If she went back, she'd likely be on her own for a long stretch. So the girl had chosen, decisively, to stay at the pub with Aris. It's fine. If you want to check whether some piece of knowledge holds true, you have to test it out. Aris carefully let a measure of wormwood infusion fall into the cauldron, and clear bubbles rose at once from the brew within, meaning his water of life and death had come out a success. For sheer convenience, the leaky cauldron really was a fine place. Any magical materials or props Aris wanted could be found in Diagon Alley, and for the more sensitive dark magic materials that couldn't, he could try his luck in Nocturne Alley. Just as Luna said, the whole living room had been all but transformed into Aris's laboratory. Cauldrons, alchemical apparatus, even wand-making equipment could be seen about the place. Most of it was new, but Aris reckoned he'd have use for all of it over the coming month. At the center of the room, he deliberately shifted the original sofa into the corner and cleared a small empty platform in its place. On that platform, a magic array had been drawn, gorgeous at a glance, yet profound and unfathomable on closer study. It was the spell-storing array Aris had seen in Merlin's notes. This was only the array's prototype, though, carved directly onto an object, it would have no effect at all. Inscribing a true magic array required the guidance of magic power, and Merlin's notes didn't spell out the precise method. Which was exactly why Aris needed time to research it. He had a hunch that if he studied this array thoroughly, and added a material capable of sustaining it, he might just be able to create a wand that casts spells on its own. Big brother, I found the answer to your question. Just as Aris was decanting the water of life and death from the cauldron into a bottle, Luna, reading nearby, spoke up. A thunderbird has a head rather like a hawk's, and multiple powerful wings. The beating of its wings can stir up storms and heavy rain. Thunderbirds can also sense danger in advance. They come from the arid regions of Arizona. Congratulations, daily quest completed. 300 academic points obtained. Listening to the systems chime at his ear, Aris feigned dawning comprehension. Ah, so that's how it is. It seems our Luna's knowledge grows deeper by the day. Aris was in high spirits, having pulled in 500 points from this quest across 2 rewards. He opened the system panel for a look. In just 3 days he'd built up nearly 2,000 points, aside from a little contributed by Ollivander earlier, all of it had come from Luna, and of course from his steady daily reading. In Aris's eyes, Luna was simply a little angel. The days slipped by as the two of them studied and experimented, one after another. A month was neither long nor short. In that time, Aris would occasionally drop by Ollivander's to trade ideas about the auto-casting wand. Apart from that, the various magical material shops were where he could be found most often. He bought up materials in quantity and stored them in bags enchanted with an undetectable extension charm. They might well prove useful once he was at Hogwarts. In her free moments, Luna would now and then tell Aris about the state of the wizarding world, the Ministry of Magic especially. Big brother, the current Minister for Magic is actually rather timid. He wants to do something grand to build his own prestige, but he always hesitates. Otherwise he wouldn't be brought up and mocked so often in the Quibbler. With her father as the paper's editor-in-chief, Luna had read no end of magazines and picked up plenty of ministry gossip. Sharp as her mind was, her read on things could sometimes run deeper even than Xenophilius's. And so, in that short span, Aris's understanding of the wizarding world grew deeper too. At last, a month on, the day Aris had been waiting for arrived. September 1st, King's Cross Station. Henry had packed away all of Aris's things, including the various experimental supplies and equipment from the inn. Aris, before setting off for Hogwarts, had already rebuilt a better-equipped laboratory in the Room of Requirement. "Luna, cheer up, I'm off to school, not to Azkaban." Aris looked, helpless, at Luna's plainly sullen mood. Since 3 days ago the girl had been smiling less and less, and he knew perfectly well why. But there was no help for it. Luna wasn't yet old enough for school, and he could hardly spirit her off to Hogwarts without leave. "It's only a year, we can go to Hogwarts together next year." Aris promised again. "And I'll write to you often, I swear. I'll have Iris carry the letters. You can keep her a while longer, how's that?" At that, Luna's face lit up with a smile again. "Mom always said we should be honest people." She said it low, her expression drifting back into that dreamy look. "Of course." Aris touched the little girl's hair fondly. Beside them, Henry watched Aris about to step through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. He hesitated, then set his jaw and asked, "Young master, might you tell me now when you plan to return to the estate? A great many people are waiting for you." Aris paused and turned to look at him. After a moment's thought, he smiled. "Let's wait until Christmas. We'll give them a surprise then." At that, Henry's eyes brightened, then, in an instant, reddened. He nodded, deeply satisfied, and said through tears, "Very well, Christmas it is. When the time comes, I'll prepare a grand homecoming ceremony for the young master." "Excuse me, Mr. Shafik." Just as Aris and the others were about to step onto platform 9 3/4, a voice came from behind. Aris turned to find a familiar thin figure. "Harry Potter." He sighed inwardly. "Is this fate? Of all people, I run into Mr. Boy who lived here, unable to find the platform." "Excuse me, sir, I'm looking for platform 9 3/4, and I thought perhaps you might know the way." "Of course." Aris nodded and pointed to the wall between platforms 9 and 10. "All you have to do is face that wall and charge straight through it." "Sorry." Harry looked at him, baffled. Plainly he thought Aris was having him on. "The young master's right. Pass through that wall, and you'll reach platform 9 3/4, Henry explained. Just as Harry hesitated, another voice came from behind him. "Everyone, follow me, quickly, the station's packed, so don't get separated, and don't miss the window to get onto the platform." Aris didn't even need to look back to guess the voice belonged to the Weasleys. Sure enough, a moment later several red-haired wizards came along, pushing carts. "Hello, are you also going to?" Harry began, on reflex. "Platform 9 3/4. Mrs. Weasley glanced at him, then smiled kindly. "Of course. You must be a young wizard off to school as well." "Yes, I'm Harry. Harry Potter." "Oh, my, is that so?" A slightly surprised voice piped up from behind. "You really are Harry Potter." "Ronald, don't gawk so." Mrs. Weasley shot a disapproving look at a red-haired boy about Aris's height. "He isn't a monkey at the zoo, what's all the fuss?" "That's right. Our brother's amazed by everything he lays eyes on." "Pay him no mind," one of the twins, red-haired too, teased. "Sorry, I just, you're very famous." Ronald ducked his head, a little embarrassed, his face flushing. "It's all right." Harry smiled. He could tell this family was a warm, funny lot, not out to make sport of him. "All right, the platform's about to close, hurry along." Mrs. Weasley urged the children on, then glanced curiously at Aris. "And this handsome silver-haired boy must be a young wizard too?" "Yes, ma'am." Aris nodded with a smile. "Then let's not dawdle, time's short. With that, Mrs. Weasley took the lead, guiding a small blonde girl through the wall onto the platform. That little girl was, of course, the Weasleys' youngest, Ginny. "Come on, children." Arthur Weasley, who'd been quiet until now, only smiling at the youngsters, urged them along. As the Weasley twins passed through the wall, he spared Aris a glance, seemingly with some notion of who the boy might be. But in the end he didn't quite dare say hello, and simply followed the twins through. Soon the rest of the Weasleys had gone onto the platform one after another, until only Harry, Ronald, and Aris were left. "Shall we go too?" Ronald called to Harry, and the two of them stepped onto the platform together. Aris glanced at Luna, who looked plainly envious, took her hand, and walked onto the platform with a smile. "Henry, you'll see Luna home yourself later. Do be careful." Aris gave Henry a final word, then looked at Luna. "Remember, I'll me the moment you're home, so I know you're safe." "I understand." Luna nodded. At that, Aris felt easier. Then, under Luna's reluctant gaze, one she tried, and failed, to keep indifferent, he walked toward the scarlet Hogwarts train. "Big brother, remember to write to me." Luna reminded him, pointedly. "Don't worry, I won't let Iris sit idle. I'll write when I've the time." Aris waved to the two of them. Not until his figure had vanished entirely into the train did it slowly pull away. Luna couldn't help wiping the corners of her eyes, rubbing the damp quietly into her palm. "Come, Miss Luna." Though Henry felt a pang himself, he spoke gently, evenly. "The young master will be back before long. Parting is only for the sake of a better reunion, isn't it?" The girl watched the direction the train had gone and quietly resolved something. "I must study harder, and learn more, so I can answer Big Brother's questions all the better in future." What a lovely child, Henry thought. On the train. Aris paid no particular attention to where Harry and the others had gone, he simply found a compartment and settled in. But after a few minutes, a small head peeked around the compartment door. "Harry?" Aris was a little surprised. "I picked a compartment at random, and ran into the boy who lived anyway. Is this the fabled hand of fate?" "Excuse me, Mr. Shofik, I went looking for your compartment specially." Harry said it a touch sheepishly. "If it's all right, might I sit here? There are some things I'd like to talk over with you." "Of course, though do call me Aris. We'll be classmates from now on, after all." Aris was a little curious what Harry wanted with him. "Thank you." Harry smiled and sat down across from him. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Aris asked directly. Harry thought a moment before speaking. "Hagrid told me your situation might be even worse than mine. So I wanted to ask, how do you stay so calm? As if none of it touches you at all." At that, Aris laughed inwardly. "So this fellow's appointed me his life coach. How to face outside pressure with a level head, for a question like that, shouldn't he be asking the strongest backer any young wizard at Hogwarts could have, Headmaster Dumbledore? Why come to me?" Aris thought it over, and a smile crossed his face. "It's actually quite simple. When you have absolute strength, you can handle anything with ease." He paused. "I know that might be a tall order for you just now, but there's another way. You could try toughening up your hide. In a situation like this, so long as you're not embarrassed, it's everyone else who is. So, Aris, I want to know, how exactly does one toughen up their hide?" Harry, seemingly deaf to the irony in Aris's tone, asked in complete earnest. "Aris." Looking at the boy who lived and his utterly innocent expression, he suddenly had no idea what to say. "Hey, the other compartments are all full. Mind if I sit here?" Just as Aris was still working out how to tell Harry he'd only been joking, another voice came from the door. Ronald Weasley stood there a little awkwardly, looking at the two inside. "Of course." Harry quickly scooted along, then seemed to catch himself and looked to Aris to confirm. "That's all right, isn't it, Aris? Please, sit." Aris nodded to Ronald. Once Ronald had sat down, the compartment lapsed into a brief silence. What Aris and Harry had been discussing was, after all, a bit private. Perhaps Harry felt it embarrassing to ask advice on such a thing, and so let it drop. "So, you really do have it, then?" After a moment, Ronald broke the silence. Just like the scene from the original story, Harry readily showed him the lightning-shaped scar. With the topic broken open, the mood in the compartment eased all at once, and the three of them introduced themselves. Perhaps that was how quickly children's friendships came together. As for Aris, his attention was already on the rat cradled in Ronald's arms. If he remembered right, that rat's identity was anything but simple, an animagus, and the very one who'd betrayed Harry Potter's parents, and gotten them killed by Voldemort. "This is Scabbers. Bit of a sorry sight, isn't he?" Ronald said, seeming to notice Aris looking at the rat. "Not at all, he looks like he's eating quite happily to me." The snack trolley which had just come by, and Harry had bought a good deal, the rat was now munching away contentedly in Ronald's hand. "Oh, right." Ronald seemed to remember something. "Fred taught me a spell that'll turn him yellow. Want to see?" "All right." Harry was plainly interested. He hadn't learned any spells yet. Aris showed little interest. It wasn't that he looked down on Ronald, it was that the spell Fred had taught him likely didn't deserve the name. Plainly Fred had just made it up to have his little brother on. Aris seemed to recall the line turning up in a Wizarding World mobile game from his old life. It sounded oddly familiar. Just as Ronald raised his wand to cast, yet another voice rang out from the compartment door. "Have any of you seen a toad? Neville's lost his." The girl's words trailed off, and then she caught sight of Aris. "Aris, you're here." It was Hermione Granger, plainly delighted to find him. "I've been searching the whole train for you and couldn't find you anywhere. I never thought you'd be here." "Hello, Miss Granger." Aris nodded slightly. "You two know each other?" Harry looked between them, curious. "Oh, it was quite the legendary experience," Hermione said sincerely, recalling everything that had happened after she'd met Aris at Flourish and Blots. "Oh, but were you about to cast a spell?" The girl's sudden turn caught everyone off guard. Yes." Ronald looked a little sheepish. "Wonderful, let's see it, then." Miss Granger lifted her chin with a faintly haughty air. Perhaps it was the top student in her, unwilling to admit she came up short against anyone, even in this magical world she'd known nothing of until recently. "Ahem." Ronald cleared his throat, raised his wand again, and intoned the spell. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid, fat rat yellow." As the wand swept down, a faint yellow light flashed, and knocked aside the snack Scabbers had been nibbling. The rat's fur, however, didn't change in the slightest. Ronald pouted, embarrassed, shrugged, and looked to Harry, who had no more idea what had gone wrong, and could only offer a helpless smile in return. "Are you quite sure that's a spell? It doesn't look like much, does it?" Miss Granger smiled, her lecturing streak plainly kicking in. She'd decided to show Ronald what casting a spell actually meant. "As it happens, I know a few spells myself." "Such as?" Miss Know-It-All suddenly drew her wand, came over to Harry, and sat down beside Aris. "Reparo." Hermione pointed her wand at Harry Potter's glasses. After a wave of magic, the spot where his nose bridge had been taped flickered, and in an instant the tape was gone, a brand new bridge in its place where the broken part had been. "Whoa, that's amazing!" Ronald exclaimed from the side, without thinking. Harry was plainly surprised too. He took the glasses off, examined them closely, then looked at Hermione with admiration. "Honestly, this is nothing. Aris is far more gifted than me, he could do far better." Hermione turned the subject abruptly back to Aris. "By the way, why did you say meeting him was such a legend? Harry, glasses back on, couldn't help asking, plainly curious. Ronald beside him looked keenly interested too, his eyes darting between Aris and Hermione. Well, you might not believe it. Hermione shrugged and said, mysteriously, what Aris did is beyond anything you could imagine. The girl's slightly overblown air sent a few dark lines sliding down Aris's forehead. He hadn't realized Miss Know-It-All could be such a gossip, and one who loved keeping people in suspense, no less. Come on, out with it. Harry and Ronald could hardly wait any longer. Seeing their faces, Hermione nodded, satisfied, and went on. 10 minutes. Reciting cold, he completed the ultimate challenge at flourish and blots. 10 minutes reading a book, and he recited the whole thing back, over 10,000 words at the very least. HSSS. Harry and Ronald couldn't help sucking in a breath at Aris's staggering result. Give me a whole day and I couldn't recite a 2,000-word fairy tale. Ronald muttered. That's incredible. Harry was plainly even more astonished. He'd gone to a Muggle school, so he understood better than most just how impossible that challenge was. Unbelievable, isn't it? Hermione looked at Aris intently, seeming a touch unconvinced still. Aris, your memory's this good, so your magical talent must be splendid too. How about you show us a spell? There it was at last, the little scheme Miss Know-It-All had been building toward. After all, her pride as a top student wouldn't let her concede. She meant to make up for her roundabout defeat to Aris by proving herself on spellwork. Of course Aris could see straight through her. But he knew perfectly well the girl meant no harm, she was simply being prickly and proud. And so he only smiled gently. Then he drew the silver-gray wand from his robes and pointed it at the rat in Ronald's hand. What are you doing? Ronald instinctively made to scoop up Scabbers, out of the wand's path, but his hands were nowhere near quick enough. Didn't you want to see me cast a spell? Watch closely. The silver-gray wand gave a light tap, and a beam of light struck the rat in Ronald's hand, sure and unerring. Aris could see it clearly, for the briefest instant, something like fear flickered in the rat's eyes, startlingly human. The next second, Scabbers' body twisted rapidly and transformed into a goblet. That's an extremely advanced transfiguration. Hermione stared at the goblet in Ronald's hand, wide-eyed and disbelieving. She couldn't help standing up, taking the goblet, and examining it closely. I've read a few explanations of transfiguration in books. A successful transfiguration completely turns one object into another. Look at this goblet, clear grain, fine material, not the slightest trace of a rat left. Spell work like this should be flatly impossible for a young wizard who's only just starting school. She looked between Harry and Ronald, bewildered, as if hunting for some proof that Aris hadn't really been the one to do it. But you saw it too, Aris just turned Scabbers into a goblet. Ronald swallowed hard, and suddenly the snacks in his mouth didn't taste half so good. He's a genius. Harry stared at Aris, dazed. Even Hermione mending his glasses just now hadn't surprised him this much. The sight of Aris waving his wand and turning a fat rat into a goblet was simply astonishing. All three young wizards were stunned by the ease of Aris's display. Even without thinking, one knew a transformation like that demanded immense, rock-steady magic, the kind that only came after passing the OWLS. The ordinary wizarding level exams were something Hogwarts students sat in their 5th year, so these brand-new first-years had no business managing it at all. Don't be discouraged, you're already very capable, for a new wizard. Aris looked at Hermione, who seemed to have withdrawn into a small crisis of her own, and comforted her gently. And it was true. One had only to look at Ronald's spellwork to tell he'd grown up in a wizarding family, and even so, Ronald just now had shown almost no casting ability at all. That Hermione could pull off a mending charm so easily was genuinely impressive. Not that it compared to Aris, of course, his starting point was simply too high. You needn't comfort me. Hermione drew a deep breath and looked at Aris in earnest. I'll catch up to you one day. I swear it. There's really no need for that. Aris said, helpless. But seeing the girl's spirits running so high, he couldn't quite bear to dampen them. All right, then I'll await your challenge, any time. And so Aris and Miss Know-It-All struck a bargain, an agreement to spur each other on. Aris, I'm still surprised and a bit shaken, but, are you sure Scabbers will be all right? Ronald asked, worried, having examined the goblet Hermione handed back to him. Of course. He'll be fine. Aris nodded firmly. Though privately he knew perfectly well that right now Scabbers, or rather the man behind Scabbers, Wormtail, must be cursing Aris with everything he had. Can't you turn him back to how he was? Ronald looked ready to cry. Who'd have thought, one moment everything was fine, and the next, for no reason he could name, his rat was a goblet. I'm sorry, for now I can only turn a rat into a goblet. I haven't learned the spell to turn it back yet. Aris sighed apologetically. At this, Hermione's expression turned a little odd. Perhaps she was the only one there who suspected that anyone capable of so profound a transfiguration would surely know the counter to it. Aris is plainly lying. But why would he lie? The girl was a little puzzled. After turning it over, though, she decided to pretend she'd noticed nothing. Aris, she figured, always had his reasons. Did you feel that? Scabbers seems to be squirming. Ronald looked at Aris, on the verge of tears. You must be imagining it. He's a goblet now, he shouldn't have any sensation at all, Aris consoled him earnestly. You're sure? Of course. I expect he'll be back to normal in a few hours. You're sure he won't stay a goblet forever? Permanent transfiguration isn't so easy to pull off. I feel a bit sorry for Scabbers. The convivial chatter went on spilling out of the compartment. After a moment, Hermione suddenly stood. Oh, that's right, Neville's toad, I nearly forgot. She made to head out and resume her search for it. But just as she reached the door, she stopped and turned back to Aris. Aris, do you know a spell that could help Neville find his toad quickly? Aris nodded without a moment's thought. Of course. A very handy spell, that. Wonderful, please, help Neville out. Miss Know-It-All beamed, pleasantly surprised. At that, Ronald's attention finally shifted off the rat and back to Aris. Casting another spell? Harry looked visibly more excited. Since coming into the magical world, he'd never seen anyone cast so many spells in one sitting. Honestly, once you know the knack, you could do it too. Aris said it to Hermione, then recited the spell. Reveal your form. A faint ripple of magic came off the tip of the silver-gray wand. Then a beam of magical light formed into a pointing sign, and Aris nodded in the direction the magic flowed. That way. Follow my magic's guide and you'll find the toad in no time. Thank you. Before Aris could so much as react, Hermione had already hurried out of the compartment. When will we ever reach your level? Harry breathed, marveling. Don't worry, it's honestly not that hard. It's just a variation on the 4-point spell. Aris spoke encouragingly and gave the two of them a heartening look. Study hard, read plenty, and practice your spell work at school, and you should have this one down by 3rd year. Yet somehow, after hearing that, Ronald and Harry only seemed to sink lower. Or maybe, Aris thought, it was just his imagination. Well, look who it is. The famous Potter, and Shafik. Not long after Hermione left, the compartment door slid open again, and 3 figures appeared outside. Draco Malfoy shouldered his way in with his 2 lackeys, Crabbe and Goyle, his gaze moving over Harry and Aris. I heard someone outside say Harry Potter was on this train too. Seems it's true. Malfoy fixed his eyes on Harry at last, plainly a touch more famous than Aris. That toad-finding magic was rather good. Though I'd wager it wasn't you who cast it, was it? At that, Aris caught on. So Malfoy must have seen or heard, somewhere, that Hermione had found the toad by following a magical direction marker, and after a bit of asking around, learned that both Harry Potter and Aris were in this compartment. What's it got to do with you? Ronald was Harry's future best mate, all right. The moment he saw someone spoiling for trouble, he shot to his feet. Fancy being the first to stick your neck out. Malfoy glowered at him. Beside him, Crabbe and Goyle immediately crowded in and shoved Ronald back into his seat, pinning him so he couldn't move. Let him go. Harry couldn't sit still at the sight of it. You'll learn soon enough, in the wizarding world, true friendship exists only between purebloods. Malfoy stepped forward and glared at Harry, his voice hard. So, famous Mr. Potter, do you want to run with those Weasley paupers, or with me, a Malfoy, of noble and pure blood? I know exactly what sort of friends to make. I don't need you to tell me. Harry stared him down, stubborn. He'd no idea why the boy before him was so insufferably arrogant, nearly as bad as his cousin Dudley, but he wasn't about to leave Ronald to face this alone. At the very least, he had to take a stand. Not that it did much good. Crabbe and Goyle were plainly far bigger than Ronald or Harry just then, and given the young wizards present had next to no casting ability, sheer size still counted for a great deal in a scuffle like this. At least, until Aris stepped in. Draco Malfoy, was it? Aris, silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Only then did Malfoy pull his attention off Harry. That's me. What of it? He sniffed coldly and stared at Aris. Looking at the faintly pale Malfoy, all arrogant bearing and tone, Aris smiled. You know, if you want to make friends with us, there are gentler, more ordinary ways to go about it. Who said I wanted to make friends with you? An unnatural flush crossed Malfoy's face, and then he glared. Don't flatter yourself. I'm a noble Malfoy, I've never been short of friends. Perhaps, before you say that, you could let Harry and poor Ronald go. I promise they won't lay another hand on you. As he spoke, Aris gave his wand a gentle wave. An unseen force gently pried the tangle of them apart, and then, under the horrified stares of Crabbe, Goyle, and Malfoy, Aris flicked his wand again. Locomotor mortis. The leglocker curse froze the three troublemakers where they stood, unable to move an inch. They flailed their arms but couldn't keep their balance, and finally toppled to the floor in a heap. How dare you cast a spell on me? Malfoy shrieked in terror, Crabbe and Goyle wailing in fright alongside him. I did say, if you want to make friends, there are gentler ways. Aris leaned over with a smile and looked at Malfoy. So, do you prefer this approach? Off to the side, Ronald and Harry gaped at the scene. But after the shock came an odd, welling satisfaction, and neither could help grinning. Then, when the mirth faded and they caught the faint smile on Aris's face, they felt all over again just how powerful, and untouchable, this boy was. Privately they swore they'd never anger Aris, or there was no telling what might happen. I'll tell the professors, and my father, about this, and they'll make you pay, I promise you. Malfoy's face went red with rage as he growled it out. Oh. Didn't your father tell you to make friends with me? Aris said, still smiling. How did you? Malfoy seemed to remember something and cut himself off halfway. It doesn't matter. My father will punish you regardless. Just you wait. In fact, the moment Malfoy blurted out that, how did you, Aris already understood exactly what was going on. The Malfoys have quite the scheme. The information Henry had given Aris included the fact that the Malfoy family harbored designs on certain Shafik holdings, that they'd even quietly banded together with several other wizarding families to go after the Shafik assets. Aris had all of it filed away in his mind. And now old Lucius Malfoy had gone and told his son to approach him of his own accord, clearly with some purpose behind it. Aris was in no hurry, though. Arrogant as Draco is, forever fancying himself the great bully of Hogwarts, his nature isn't so rotten that he's beyond saving. Tame the little fellow, and he might just yield some unexpected returns when it comes time to deal with the Malfoys. At the thought, Aris's eyes softened, and the smile on his face deepened. What on earth do you mean to do? Malfoy shuddered at that smile. He'd have staked anything that the boy before him was the worst bully he'd ever met, terrifying, a fellow who could torment you with a smile. Don't fret, I really don't mean to do anything. Aris lifted the spell off the three of them, gave Malfoy's shoulder a light pat, and said, Here's a thought, from now on, why don't you just stick with me? You know my identity, and you know that when I want something, I get it. And if you'd rather not, well, the consequences. He paused there, and gave Malfoy a meaningful look. No, I'm in. Meeting the boy's oddly captivating eyes, Malfoy surrendered on the spot, without an ounce of fight. Sincere or not, he'd no wish to provoke Aris just now. He had a feeling that if he kept digging his own grave, the results would be tragic indeed. Very good. You've made the right choice. A gentle smile crossed Aris's face once more. After all, when it comes to friends, I've always believed in helping one another out. The scarlet locomotive rolled on between wide plains and lakes. The scenery on the way to Hogwarts was strikingly lovely, and it put Aris in a fine mood, otherwise he'd never have borne the train's crawling, tortoise-like pace. You'd all best put your robes on. I think we're nearly at the Hogwarts stop. After several long hours, at Hermione's reminder, the train finally began to slow. Aris looked out the window and saw a small platform ahead, bathed in the last glow of the setting sun, wrapped in an otherworldly stillness. Ka-dunk, ka-dunk. The train went slower and slower, and when it came to a full stop, Aris heard a familiar, rough voice. Furs years, this way. I'll take you up to the castle. That was Hagrid. Aris quickly gathered his things and, once Harry and Ronald had left, summoned Iris. Little one, take this letter to Luna for me. Can you manage that? He set a letter by the little red dragon's mouth, reached out to stroke her head, and asked. Wah! The little dragon nodded firmly, then nuzzled his palm affectionately. Remember, try not to be seen. Aris cautioned. After a month of growth, the little red dragon had gotten considerably bigger, and the climb of her stat panel had astonished Aris. Her strength now was likely no less than his own, and in some respects, a good deal greater. The little dragon nodded again, human as anything, then sprang lightly across the compartment and, with a single leap, slipped out the window. In that instant Aris saw clearly a layer of magical light spread over Iris's body, and then the little dragon vanished into the air entirely, beyond the reach of the naked eye. She grows more and more fluent with her magic. Aris nodded, approving. This spell, akin to the disillusionment charm, was actually rather different from the version wizards cast. For one, it made her far harder to detect, and it held the concealment even while she moved at speed. That done, Aris got off the train quickly. As for his luggage, Hogwarts would naturally have it delivered up to the castle. By the time he finished the sorting, he'd find it sitting quietly in his dormitory. Aris, where've you been? The moment he reached the gathering of young wizards, Ronald and Harry spotted him and asked in low voices. Nothing much. Just sending a letter. Sending a letter? Harry was curious. Do you use an owl too? Just then he seemed to think of the snowy owl Hagrid had bought him, Hedwig. Something like that. Aris answered vaguely. By now the young wizards had nearly all assembled. Hagrid's voice came again from the front. Come on, little UNS, follow me, stick close, now. Where are we going? Harry asked him, curious. You'll see soon enough. Hagrid gave him a wink. Off to the side, Ronald's voice suddenly took on a frightened edge. Fred and the others told me every young wizard has to pass some special test before they can start school. Only the ones who pass truly join Hogwarts. A test? Harry frowned slightly. Aris smiled. It seems the legacy Hogwarts left behind 1,000 years ago is at work again. These young wizards likely didn't know that as long as they went through the sorting hat ceremony, they'd be placed in one of Hogwarts' 4 houses. There was no entrance test at all. Fred and the rest were plainly just teasing Ronald, and the fellow had played right along. "Come on now, careful, and into the boats with ya. Keep order, no shoving." After a slippery path, the young wizards arrived at a small pier. A hazy mist lay over the surface of the black lake before them, and far off, the lights of Hogwarts Castle glimmered faintly. A wondrous sense of mystery settled over every young heart. "It's as if I'm about to set out on a magical adventure. I read in Hogwarts, a history that this is a tradition the schools kept for 1,000 years." Hermione Granger's voice came from the side. She'd made her way over to Aris at some point. "Every first year has to cross the Black Lake to reach the castle. I think they mean for us to retrace the founder's own path. Legend says the 4 of them crossed the Black Lake before finally arriving at Hogwarts." "You know a great deal." Aris praised generously. "I'll bet she was reading the whole time before school even started," Ronald couldn't help muttering. Aris glanced at him, faintly puzzled. "Isn't everyone like that?" Ronald and Harry exchanged a look, then quietly hung their heads. "Apart from a top student like you, what normal young wizard starts prepping their lessons this far in advance?" In fact, Harry had read a while, but the material was too hard for him to follow just now, so he'd given up quickly. Otherwise he wouldn't still be unable to cast a single spell. The little boats drifted on the vast black lake like so many leaves. Ringed by the cold water, the young wizards had plainly lost their earlier curiosity. They huddled in the boats, shivering. The torches mounted on them were of limited use, and gave little visibility. Then, all at once, a ray of light rose from one of the boats in the center of the lake. Lumos. The light was like a bright moon, drifting slowly around the boat before finally settling at the head of the whole procession. Just like that, the young wizard's view opened up enormously, and the surrounding water no longer seemed quite so cold. "Aris, brilliant." Ronald and Harry stood up in their boat, thrilled. They gazed, half enchanted, at the moonlike light not far off, hearts racing. The scene before them, the black lake, the castle, the bright moon, seemed like something out of a legend, as though they'd stepped into some mysterious land. A land that belonged to Hogwarts alone. Not far off, Hagrid and Draco Malfoy took in the sight, each with different feelings stirring in his heart. Hagrid, naturally, knew that casting a Lumos like that was no easy thing, least of all for a first year who'd had no magical training at all. His estimate of Aris rose a few notches, and he found himself quietly impressed by the boy's talent. As for Malfoy, he watched the figure bathed in that glow with feelings tangled beyond untangling. There's some reluctance in it, perhaps, but more than that, gratitude. He knew now that he'd likely never have the heart to make an enemy of that boy. Everything Aris had shown left him daunted, a being, he felt in his very bones, that he could never catch up to, let alone surpass. Beneath the moonlight, the ancient castle seemed to hold secrets without end. Mysterious Hogwarts appeared to have stood there always, waiting each year for new young wizards to come and explore it. About half an hour later, the young wizards crossed the Black Lake and reached the far shore. From there they walked the long wooden path along the pier, climbed a long stair, and at last arrived at the doors of the castle's entrance hall. "Everyone, gather here." Professor McGonagall appeared on the steps before the great doors, watching the young wizards arrive one after another. She carefully counted them, making sure not a single child was missing or had wandered off somewhere out of curiosity, then gave a satisfied nod. "Listen closely, all of you. In a moment you'll pass through this door, and after a small test, you'll truly become students of Hogwarts. So when the doors open, form an orderly line and follow me in." That said, McGonagall swept her gaze over the young wizards' faces, then turned and walked toward Filch, the Hogwarts caretaker, seemingly to check on how the feast within was coming along. "Hey, Ronald, you were right. There really is a test before we're let in." Harry Potter's deliberately hushed voice came from the side. "Did your brother say what it was?" "They say, it's very likely a fight with a giant monster." Ronald's face went pale, his voice trembling. Beside them, Hermione's expression turned unhappy too, and she looked distinctly nervous. "That can't be." Whispered murmurs rose through the crowd. "I can't picture myself fighting a giant monster, I'd be torn to pieces. If my parents had known, they'd never have sent me here." "Excuse me, is it too late to go home? I really don't want to fight a troll." The young wizards further back seemed to have caught what Ronald said, and grew uneasy before they'd even learned the details. "If it really is some giant monster, then out of all of us, I'm afraid Aris is the only one who'd manage it." Harry turned, rather reluctantly, and looked at Aris, who'd been fighting back laughter the whole time. "Ignorant." Malfoy's voice cut in suddenly from the other side. "Why, am I wrong?" Harry shot back the moment he found the source. "Do you think you could fight a troll right now?" At the mention of the troll, Malfoy's expression plainly shifted. But he soon recovered, and said mockingly, "Only someone as ignorant as you would think the test to enter Hogwarts is fighting a troll. If it were, I promise you, my father would never have let me come here." "Then may I ask, has your father ever told you what the real test is?" Harry jeered right back. Seeing the mood between the two grow more and more strained, and Professor McGonagall, not far off, looking about to head back this way, Aris could only rap them both on the head, helpless. "All right, you two. You can't get within arm's reach without bickering." He stepped between them, prying apart the two faces on the verge of butting together, and said, "Put out, won't you find out what the entrance test is in just a moment? What good does fretting over it do, except frighten yourselves?" Once Aris straightened up, both Malfoy and Harry shut their mouths on reflex. Even Ronald, indignant a moment before, obediently hung his head. Plainly none of them dared cross Aris, and perhaps they simply felt he had a point. As Aris finished, Professor McGonagall seemed to receive some signal. She turned and came quickly back toward them. "Children, the sorting ceremony is about to begin. Follow me into the hall." As she spoke, she drew along the young wizard at the front and led the way inside. Filch, the caretaker, hauled the great doors open to either side, struggling, by the look of it. The young wizards followed close behind, filing into the hall. Along both sides, students of the four houses had been waiting a good while. Every eye turned to the procession of newcomers just come in. Ronald, passing the Gryffindor table, had his hair yanked by his brothers. Harry was no longer so nervous as before, and looked around at the hall's decorations with curiosity, the ceiling above their heads especially. The great hall is enchanted. Like the decorations, it can change color at will. And overhead, we can see the night sky straight through the ceiling. It's all rather wondrous, isn't it? As expected, Hermione's voice came at just that moment, knowledge she'd plainly gotten from Hogwarts, a history. "It really is amazing." Aris nodded in agreement. Ever since he'd entered the castle, something like deep feeling had been welling quietly in his heart, like a pilgrim arriving at the hall of a sage. A scene that had appeared in his dreams now lay before his eyes, every bit of it magical, hard to believe. In that moment the whole castle seemed to open its doors to Aris, calling his name warmly, as if welcoming his arrival. "Hello, Hogwarts." Aris looked up at the sky above the hall and smiled. Just then, every worry and care seemed to melt away from the boy. A pure power enfolded Aris, as though it carried the strength to cleanse the very soul. And in that moment, he only wished to be like all the other young wizards who just entered the castle, to laugh, delighted, the way Ronald had when his hair was mussed, to widen his eyes and gasp aloud at the castle's wonders, like an innocent child stepping into a magical garden out of a dream, roaming free, searching out the unknown and mysterious. When all the young wizards had entered the hall, a strange singing suddenly rang out. Aris looked ahead and saw a worn, pointed hat set atop a tall stool below the staff table. The singing came from that ragged, badly frayed hat. You may not think I'm handsome, but don't judge on what you see, for I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. The Sorting Hat's song struck the young wizards as a little unlovely, but they could only wait patiently for it to finish. None of them knew what might happen if they offended the hat. At last, after some 10 minutes, the singing slowly died away, and Professor McGonagall's voice came right on cue. By now you all understand what the test for admission is, I trust. When I call your name, you'll come to the front, I'll place the sorting hat on your head, and it will assign you a house. Then the professor looked up and read out the first name. Hannah Abbott. Aris, which house do you want to go into? Once the young wizards understood the rules of the sorting, they breathed easier, and grew curious. Hermione turned to Aris at once. I'm definitely going into Gryffindor, nearly all my family have been in that house. Before Aris could answer, Ronald spoke up first. Hufflepuff wouldn't be bad either, they're common rooms right by the kitchens, so at least you'd never go hungry at night. As for Ravenclaw, I hear the lot in that house are all a bit off, some love to talk nonsense, others just put on airs. Ronald frowned, gave Harry Potter a mysterious look, and went on. The one I'd least want to end up in, though, is Slytherin. They say most of the dark wizards Hogwarts ever turned out came from there. Word is even the legendary, the mysterious man himself graduated from Slytherin. Harry touched his lightning-shaped scar on reflex and understood at once what Ronald meant. He'd learned a good deal about the past by now, he knew it was that mysterious man who'd killed his parents. His breathing quickened without his meaning it to. And you, Hermione? As if noticing something off about Harry, Aris quickly changed the subject, he'd no wish to discuss Voldemort with Harry just now. That would be a real mood killer. I don't know either. Hermione shook her head, at a loss. It seems Hogwarts, a history doesn't have much to say about the four houses and the sorting hat. Aris teased, half in jest. No, it really doesn't. Hermione shook her head, vexed, plainly missing the tease in his tone entirely. Seeing the unease on the girl's face, Aris smiled, helpless, but couldn't quite leave it there. The truth is, there's no good or bad among the four houses. What they stand for is nothing more than a young wizard's own character. He explained patiently. Gryffindors are brave and upright, never lacking the courage to face hard things. Hufflepuffs are loyal and honest, the best friends you could ask for. Ravenclaws are clever and kind, always with their own way of seeing things. And Slytherins, ambitious and shrewd as they are, quick to read a situation, they'll never lightly betray a friend. So when the sorting hat decides which house suits you, it isn't sorting you into good or bad at all. It's simply following your heart. Listening, several of the young wizards nodded as if they understood, and the unease slowly faded from Hermione's face. She lifted her head and asked, in earnest again, so, if you could choose, which house would you want? Ravenclaw. Aris thought about it and answered easily. Why? 3 young wizards asked at once. Because Ravenclaw's tower has the finest view in all of Hogwarts. Aris smiled, and a certain dreamy, faintly odd, endearing little girl flashed suddenly through his mind. Think about it. What could be finer than waking every day to a view like a painting? Each morning, still half asleep, you throw open the dormitory window to the mountains in the distance. And come evening, you can watch the last of the sunset gild the rippling waters of the Black Lake. Some unknown magical creature glides over the lake, and mist wreaths the far peaks until they're only faintly there. All of it, so beautiful. Harry and the others exchanged looks, then fell into thought. After a moment, Ronald raised his head and said, a touch hesitant, I still want Gryffindor. Ravenclaw gives me an odd feeling. Perhaps that's only because you've never once thought to sit down with a book and actually learn something, Hermione needled from the side. And you, Harry? The two turned back to Harry Potter. Harry hesitated a moment, then shook his head slowly. I don't know. Maybe the hat can give me some advice. All right, let's leave it there, Aris put in suddenly. It'll be Hermione's turn soon. Sure enough, as his words fell, Professor McGonagall's voice came right on cue. Hermione Granger. Oh, Hermione stood and drew a deep breath. Go on, don't be nervous. Aris reassured her. As the girl walked up to the Sorting Hat, every eye was on her. Not to worry. Professor McGonagall said softly, comforting, as she set the Sorting Hat on Hermione's head. The hat stirred atop the girl's head. The strange thing seemed to be mulling something over, and a voice sounded in her mind. A clever, kind child, with a thirst for knowledge, perhaps Ravenclaw would suit you. No, there's remarkable courage in your heart too. Honest and brave, Gryffindor would suit you as well. So, where to put you? The Sorting Hat seemed to hesitate. Ah, I think I see. You'd be better suited to Gryffindor. It lasted only an instant, before Hermione could gather herself, the voice in her mind was gone. Then a cheer went up from the long table on the Gryffindor side, to the left of the hall. Congratulations. Professor McGonagall lifted the hat from Hermione's head and pointed her toward the Gryffindor table with a smile. Off you go, they're all waiting for you. Even now, Hermione was still a little dazed, turning over what that voice in her mind had said. Clever, kind, perfect for Ravenclaw. So why was I sorted into Gryffindor in the end? Her eyes drifted, without meaning to, toward Aris, and she thought of what he'd said just before. He seemed to want Ravenclaw. Meanwhile the sorting went on. Ronald and Harry both passed and made it into Gryffindor. Just as in the book, Harry Potter was the student the Sorting Hat hesitated over longest of anyone so far. At last, when only a few young wizards remained, Professor McGonagall read out Aris's name. Aris Shafik. The name drew a great many eyes at once. Even some students already waiting on their supper turned back toward the Sorting Hat. News of the Shafik heir's appearance had, over nearly a month of coverage in the Daily Prophet and other papers, caught no small amount of attention. By now it wasn't only Ronald and the young wizards who'd already met Aris, or the students who'd heard the Shafik name, even at the staff table, several pairs of eyes turned his way. Everyone except Harry Potter, of course. At tonight's sorting ceremony, the one who drew the most attention of all was Aris. Care to guess which house he'll end up in? At the Gryffindor table, Percy Weasley was discussing Aris's sorting with several Gryffindors beside him. Who knows? Why are you so interested in that first year? You don't know. He's the last heir of the Shafik family. The Shafik family? Are they important? Good grief, you don't even know the Shafiks. After a brief back and forth, Percy quickly realized there was really no point talking with these people. Do they not read the Daily Prophet? However clueless you are, you ought to know the Shafik family, once a famous, formidable house in the wizarding world, one of the Sacred 28. You Gryffindors, hopeless. Just then a voice drifted over from the Slytherin table behind Percy, proud in tone. Shafik belongs in Slytherin, plainly. He's a true pure-blood, and only a great Slytherin could ever be worthy of his standing. Rubbish. Who says pure-bloods have to go to Slytherin? Percy shot back, thoroughly displeased. In truth, he rather hoped Aris would end up in his own house. The Shafik family's standing and wealth had astonished no small number of people. If he could, Percy would have liked to be on good terms with Aris, so that come graduation, the Shafik connection might open a few doors for him. He's definitely a Gryffindor. He's Slytherin. Maybe he fancies Hufflepuff's food. Come off it, I heard on the train the boy's an absolute prodigy. He'll be Ravenclaw, more likely. Wave after wave of chatter broke out across the hall, gathering into a buzz that carried all the way up to the staff table at the front. Quiet. Professor McGonagall had to raise her voice, drowning out the noise. Now, Aris, if you'll put on the sorting hat. The boy walked up, sat on the stool, and felt the ragged hat settle onto his head. Then a voice spoke in his mind. Well now, richly gifted, extraordinarily talented, and very clever. Ambitious and calculating, yet kind-hearted, with a courage most people lack. I dare say, Hufflepuff aside, the other 3 houses would all suit you nicely. What, I'm not loyal and honest. Aris found himself objecting on reflex. No, it's only that, set against your other qualities, loyalty and honesty plainly aren't your most outstanding traits, the Sorting Hat explained. So, which house shall I put you in? As Aris conversed with the hat, the hall gradually fell quiet. As the moments dragged on, more and more people turned to look at the figure on the stool at the front, curiosity on their faces. Apart from Harry Potter, no first year had ever taken so long to sort. In the other students' eyes, that alone was proof enough that Aris was something out of the ordinary. So, you sort each young wizard by their single most outstanding quality? Aris pressed on with the hat. He'd always been curious whether the thing truly had a wholly independent consciousness, or was simply a programmed test. If it's a fully independent mind, how did it come to be? As far as I know, the 4 founders only placed a portion of their own thoughts into the hat, which surely isn't enough to give it genuine self-awareness. By that reasoning, the Sorting Hat should be some sort of magical testing device, a blend of legitimacy and a set of screening methods, one that merely looks intelligent, and can hold a simple conversation with its subject under certain conditions. Of course not. I've always held that if a young wizard would grow better in a certain house, then that's the best choice for them, the hat replied. Then why not sort every student who'd go to Gryffindor into Ravenclaw instead? Aris countered evenly. Don't brave people need brains too? Of course brave folk need brains. But no, Gryffindor stands for courage, that is their most precious quality. Then why not sort Slytherins into Ravenclaw? Aris's cool voice came again. Ambition's better realized with a sharp mind behind it, isn't it? Of course, ambition without wits accomplishes nothing. But no, the 2 houses represent different qualities, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. So I misheard, did I? Who was it just said each young wizard should go to the house best for their growth? Isn't that rather a contradiction? At Aris's words, the Sorting Hat fell silent. Why so quiet? Anything left to argue? If not, then assign me a house. By now Aris was fairly certain, this Sorting Hat really was a kind of testing instrument, one artificially imbued with certain thoughts and enchanted with magic, giving it the ability to peer into a young wizard's mind. That was how it read the different reactions and surface thoughts that surfaced during a sorting, roughly analyzed a child's character, and assigned them a fitting house. To put it plainly, it was rather like a psychological questionnaire, answer a set of fixed questions, and most people could be sorted, roughly, into a few categories. The hat had simply changed the process, from the subject actively choosing their answers, to the hat picking the answers out of them. Perhaps this method leads to the odd error now and then. But what complicated thoughts could a crowd of 11-year-olds really have? For the hat's purposes, reading their surface thinking was more than enough to tell them apart and finish the sorting. But with Aris, everything was different. Thanks to his deliberate steering, it was plain the Sorting Hat was now struggling to screen him at all. In a case like this, if the subject didn't make a choice of their own, the test could well drag on and on. All right, put me in Ravenclaw. In the end, Aris gave in with a wry thought. His whole exchange with the hat had, in fact, been a collision of thoughts within his own mind. Aris had simply used a method of focused will to make his thinking clear enough for the hat to catch. And now, having grasped Aris's final choice, the Sorting Hat made its decision at just the right moment. Of course, if you're certain, then Ravenclaw. When the Sorting Hat's verdict rang out, the whole hall fell silent for a moment, and then loud cheers erupted from the Ravenclaw table. We actually got Shafik. This is incredible. Ravenclaw forever. At the Slytherin and Gryffindor tables, meanwhile, everyone was stunned, unable to understand why Aris had chosen Ravenclaw. A member of the Sacred 28, and he didn't pick Slytherin. Unbelievable. The hat took so long, he must have had a chance to sway it himself. Has Ravenclaw ever turned out anyone especially famous? I can't seem to think of one just now. Professor Flitwick's a Ravenclaw, why don't you go ask him? As the talk spread, the hall dissolved into a buzz once more. After Aris took his seat at the Ravenclaw table, his eyes drifted naturally to the staff table, where several people were watching him. Professor McGonagall's expression was complicated, a trace of some indescribable unease in her eyes. Aris had no idea what she was so worried about. Just then, he suddenly remembered, the question he'd put to Professor McGonagall about the nature of magic still hadn't been answered. It's been a month, surely she has an answer by now. At the thought, Aris made up his mind at once. Before the feast ends, I'll find a chance to put another question to Professor McGonagall. When Aris looked to the seat at the very center of the staff table, to McGonagall's right, an old wizard with long silver hair and beard sat there. He wore half-moon spectacles above his blue eyes, the lenses glinting in the light. There was always an air of quiet command about his face, and a look, when he regarded someone, that seemed to reach straight into the heart. The instant Aris saw him, a name flashed through his mind. Albus Dumbledore. As if noticing the boy's gaze, the old wizard gently raised his goblet toward Aris, like a kindly grandfather, and smiled. And in that moment, Aris's heart couldn't help but skip, because when Dumbledore looked at him, Aris felt a genuine chill run through him, as though he'd been seen straight through, not a secret left. Legilimency, Aris murmured, a thoughtful look in his eyes. It seems I'll need to spend even longer practicing occlumency. He'd no wish to stand before Dumbledore in future with no secrets to his name. There were a few tricks that could temporarily throw off mind reading, keeping one's thoughts tightly focused, dwelling deliberately on only the information you wished the other to see, so they couldn't accurately dig up anything more. But that was only the most basic defense against legilimency, and limited at that. To truly resist it, one had to become a genuinely powerful occlumens. Over the past month Aris had been studying occlumency, but that ability couldn't be gained overnight, it took constant practice, and Aris wasn't willing to let anyone go rooting through the secrets in his mind. So his occlumency hadn't come along much yet. Dumbledore's knack for casting legilimency anytime, anywhere, with a single glance, was frankly overpowered, which only forced Aris to pour more effort into his own study of the art. At last, Aris also caught a strange gaze from the staff table. It belonged to Professor Quirrell. For some reason, Aris always felt uneasy whenever he met Quirrell's eyes, an unreasoning malice, sensed on pure instinct. Aris could feel that Quirrell must be scheming something just then. And that something might well be aimed at me. Could this be the prophetic talent at work? Aris looked thoughtfully at the seemingly timid professor, then gave a slight shake of his head. Whether Quirrell or Voldemort, at their current strength neither was much threat to Aris, and he was confident that over the coming months, the gap would only widen further in his favor. And now, I'll hand the floor over to Headmaster Dumbledore. After that, scarcely anyone paid mind to the sorting of the last few young wizards, everyone was talking about Aris, or about Harry Potter. Then Professor McGonagall returned to the staff table and gave her glass a light tap. The clear note, seemingly cast with magic, carried plainly through the whole hall. Dumbledore rose and cleared his throat, his deep, aged voice ringing out across the room. A few words before we begin, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. As the silver-haired wizard finished, the whole hall burst into warm applause. At the same moment, food appeared on the 4 long tables in an instant, and rich aromas swept through the hall. Let the feast begin. The young wizards, already starving, stood on no ceremony and dug in with abandon. At the Gryffindor table, Hermione looked, a little annoyed, at Aris's back not far off, her brow faintly furrowed. Even now she was still wondering why the Sorting Hat hadn't put her in Ravenclaw too. When I was being sorted, perhaps if I'd been a little more set on it, maybe I'd have gone to Ravenclaw as well. Then at least I'd know exactly how far ahead Aris has grown, and I could talk over my studies with him more often. But now. She looked at Ronald and Harry, already stuffing their faces, and just felt tired. These two clowns look so hopeless, nothing at all like Aris. At this rate, the gap between him and me will only grow. And that's something I'll never allow. On the other side, Aris, having eaten a little, turned to a young Asian which he'd only just met. Cho-Chang, might I ask you something? The pretty little witch, face faintly pink, quickly swallowed her mouthful, then nodded. Of course. Well, I was wondering. Aris glanced toward Professor McGonagall and asked, hesitant, if I went to ask Professor McGonagall a few questions right now, do you think she'd find it rude? Cho-Chang blinked, then smiled. Not at all, so long as it isn't something terribly urgent, professors are usually glad to answer students' questions. That's a relief, then. Aris nodded with a smile, stood, and started toward the staff table. Wait, what is it you want to know? Perhaps I could tell you. Cho-Chang, taking in the boy's handsome face and long silver hair, called after him on reflex. Ah, thank you, but Professor McGonagall said this question is a bit difficult, not something we ought to study at our age. So I think there's a very good chance you wouldn't know the answer either. He smiled. But I promise, if I get the answer out of Professor McGonagall, I'll tell you. Just as Aris turned to go, Cho-Chang's voice came again from behind. Wait, what is it you want to know? Perhaps I could tell you. Taking in Aris's handsome, delicate face and his long silver hair, Cho called after him once more, for reasons she couldn't quite name. I've studied at Hogwarts 2 years now, after all. As if to lend herself more weight, the little witch stressed her seniority. But Aris only smiled and shook his head. Well, thank you, but Professor McGonagall said this question is rather difficult, not something we ought to be pondering at our age. So I think there's a good chance you wouldn't know the answer either. Still, I promise, if I get it out of Professor McGonagall, I'll tell you. With that, Aris turned again and walked toward the staff table. Isn't it a question we ought to be considering at our age? Cho watched his retreating figure, curious, still turning it over. What sort of question could lead Professor McGonagall to a conclusion like that? And why is the boy so set on finding the answer? After a moment, a smile crossed her face. It seems the Sorting Hat chose well. He's simply a clever boy with a powerful thirst for knowledge. At the staff table, Professor McGonagall got a sudden bad feeling the moment she saw Aris heading her way. Headmaster, I've just remembered some work I need to see to, so. She made at once to rise, to escape this budding trouble, to get well clear of Aris. Things didn't go as she'd hoped. Professor McGonagall, is there truly something more pressing than the feast just now? Dumbledore was plainly puzzled. Then he saw Aris approaching, smiling at McGonagall, and the silver-haired wizard's own smile turned thoughtful as understanding dawned. It seems you're hiding from someone, Minerva. He looked at Aris, curious. What I don't quite grasp is why you'd be hiding from a first year, of all people. Headmaster, I think you've misunderstood. Her thoughts guessed at, McGonagall coughed lightly, a little embarrassed, and sat back down as though nothing had happened. Is that so? Dumbledore asked, giving Aris a meaningful look. Well, I think you've misunderstood too, Headmaster. Aris stood calmly before the old wizard and said with a smile, I only want to ask Professor McGonagall a question. I don't imagine she'd actually avoid me over that, would she? Of course not. McGonagall coughed again and raised her voice slightly. Aris, ask whatever you like. If I know the answer, and it touches on no secret that mustn't be spoken, I'll tell you all I know. Thank you, Professor McGonagall. Aris nodded, staying humble. It's the same question I asked you before, about the true nature of magic. A month ago, In the hall of the Lovegood house, you told me you'd explain the answer in full once I reached Hogwarts. So I think now is the time, isn't it? The nature of magic. Dumbledore looked at McGonagall, surprise behind his half-moon spectacles, as if he hadn't expected Aris to raise such a thing. That's right, the nature of magic. Aris looked at the silver-haired wizard in earnest. I've been wondering, magic may be a gift wizards are born with, but what kind of power is it? Is it like the formulas of chemistry and physics in the Muggle world, bound by rules of some sort? If we could make these things clear, perhaps the whole wizarding world would benefit. Understand it, and creating spells might grow easier. Our command of magic would become something we could trace and measure, rather than a mysterious power so deep it can't be put into ordinary words. As Aris spoke, every professor at the staff table turned to look, surprise in their eyes, and though they tried their best to hide it, an unmistakable strangeness remained. Mr. Shafik, you understand, surely, that these questions may not be ones a young wizard needs to trouble himself with so deeply. Dumbledore's expression had turned faintly unreadable at some point. He regarded Aris in earnest, a strange light behind the glinting half-moon lenses. Of course I understand that even grown wizards may not grasp the basics of these questions. Aris stayed composed, but his voice grew steadily louder, his tone steadily firmer. But that's precisely the problem. The wizarding world has been hidden from the wider world too long, so long that a great many things have fallen out of step with it. He looked at McGonagall in earnest, though the words, properly, were meant for Dumbledore. When I received my Hogwarts letter and learned I was a wizard, I looked at once into the whole history of the wizarding world, including the 2 dark wars that nearly laid this hidden world bare before everyone. Perhaps some of you have already seen how far Muggle technology has come. Such change could almost be called a different world by the day, and that's no exaggeration. Why has the Muggle world changed so drastically? Because they've never stopped trying to understand the truth of this world, to explore the unseen, microscopic realm, a place in its own way more mysterious than magic. They classified every known substance, and set down the changes that come of one substance meeting another. One chemical phenomenon after another, one physical phenomenon after another, analyzed and turned to use. They are reshaping the very form of civilization that came before them, a wholly new kind of civilization, of technology, with limitless possibility. If they can do it, then why can't we? Why can't we study, explore, lay bare the deepest principles of magic, and find the root essence of this power? Why not? At some point the whole hall had fallen silent. Every young wizard's eyes were fixed on the boy standing straight below the staff table, speaking. His voice echoed through the hall, and it seemed to carry some unspeakable power, one that set the young wizards' hearts trembling. Not only the young wizards, even the teachers at the staff table were filled with shock in that moment. I've always believed that young wizards are the backbone of the wizarding world. These questions aren't the burden of grown wizards alone, they're our responsibility. Aris clenched his fist. Even a first year at Hogwarts should have the courage to reach for those ultimate questions. Only so will the wizarding world have any hope of a brighter future. The truth was, ever since Aris had come into this world, one question had been on his mind: how was he to survive here? Keep a low profile, tuck himself away in some quiet corner until he was strong enough to step out. Trail after the protagonists, using his knowledge of the plot to coast on free meals, drinks, and glory. Or show his talent to the world outright, and announce his arrival from a loftier height. It wasn't until the moment the system appeared that he finally decided. Keeping a low profile was impossible, as a Shafik, there was no way he wouldn't draw attention. Trailing the protagonists through the plot. That wasn't what he wanted. Rule those out, and only the last option remained. This world was cruel, yes, but only to those of middling talent, with no background and no one to rely on. And he, Aris Shafik, had none of those troubles. After merging Merlin's talent card, he possessed the finest magical gift in the world. As the last Shafik heir, he needn't worry about resources. And as a transmigrator, he knew the course of every major event in this world, and the temperament of nearly every important figure in it. With advantages like these, why cower, and back himself into a corner? It's all right, Professor McGonagall. If you still can't answer the question, I'm happy to give you a little more time. Into the deathly silent hall, Aris's voice rang out once more. Gasps rose from every direction. Every Hogwarts student in the hall was stunned, their faces a sight to behold. And that was exactly the effect Aris wanted. This was how he announced his arrival to the world. Aris, you. Professor McGonagall's expression was a tangle, embarrassment, apprehension, and above all, alarm. Because what the boy had just said was staggering. It wasn't merely an overturning of the wizarding world's existing order, it was a challenge to professors like her. Long as his words had run, in the end they came down to the same thing: Hogwarts teaching is hopelessly antiquated. It's time for change. The wizarding world is backward, and it's time the new generation, Aris's generation, changed it. As for the question of magic's nature, in the eyes of professors like McGonagall, even Dumbledore, it was likely just a pretext. What on earth is this boy after? Professor Dumbledore? McGonagall turned to the silver-haired wizard beside her, seeking his counsel. Perhaps we ought to have a proper talk with this child. Dumbledore's expression had grown somewhat grave. Because in Aris he seemed to catch the shadow of a dear friend from his own youth, a man still imprisoned in the high tower of Nurmengard. His name was Grindelwald. And the point was, Dumbledore had put him there himself. Dumbledore turned to McGonagall. You'll host the rest of the feast. As he spoke, the silver-haired wizard rose and nodded to the other professors. If any of you have questions, we can speak later. For now, I'd like a word with this young man. Do forgive me. Then something seemed to occur to him, and he turned back to give McGonagall a further instruction. Remember, Mr. Filch has a few things to remind the students of. And there are the various school prohibitions to announce to this year's first years. That said, Dumbledore waved Aris over. Come along, lad, sit with me in my office. There are plenty of sweets up there, I'm sure you'll find something to your taste. Gladly, Headmaster Dumbledore. Aris smiled and nodded. Then he looked at Professor McGonagall and added, Professor, I think I'll have to keep troubling you until I get my answer. Why do you still care about that wretched answer? McGonagall very nearly swore. Of course I do, it concerns the future of the entire wizarding world, Aris replied, matter of fact. As Aris followed Dumbledore off, McGonagall finally couldn't hold it in, and muttered under her breath. Merlin's stinky socks, I must have been mad, promising to give that boy the answer he wanted. Such an outrageous answer, no less. Minerva, did you truly promise that child a month ago that you'd teach him the true nature of magic? A voice came from the side. Professor Flitwick was looking at her strangely, a note of disbelief in his tone. I hadn't much choice, had I? I could hardly let the boy walk away from our first meeting thinking every professor at Hogwarts was a fool. McGonagall said it, put out. Who knew he'd hold on to it this long? He is a singular child, no question. On the other side, Professor Sprout, head of Hufflepuff, remarked quietly. After that, the whole teaching staff fell to discussing Aris. Even Professors Snape and Quirrell, silent until now, put in a question or two, seemingly by chance. To say nothing of the students of the 4 houses out in the hall. The room, so lately silent as the grave, had boiled over the moment Aris left. Students from every house were caught up in fervent discussion and speculation, as if waiting on something. I can't believe he talked back to a professor. And a first year, no less, that's the maddest part. He said we're the future of the wizarding world. I don't know why, but hearing it, my blood just stirred. Shafak's right. Why can't a young wizard think about the ultimate questions of magic? Are we short a brain? I'll remember this year's welcome feast for a long time, and the first year named Aris Shafak. Doesn't it strike you? If what Aris said about Muggle technology is true, it's frankly terrifying. Rubbish. The fellow's just exaggerating. No idea where he heard those tales, spouting nonsense up there. Quite. A first year, barely through the door, daring to say such inflammatory things at the feast, is he not afraid of being expelled? Many of the students were stirred by Aris's words, though of course there were the level-headed ones too, and the jealous and scornful. But whatever the impression, good or ill, Aris was now fixed in every student's memory. The sort, most likely, that couldn't be forgotten even if one tried. Cockroach cluster. At Dumbledore's softly spoken command, the gargoyle guarding the office door slowly turned aside, revealing the entrance beyond. The silver-haired wizard seemed not to mind in the least that Aris, behind him, had heard the office's password. Or perhaps he'd meant for him to, so that next time he sought Aris out, he'd have no need to repeat it. What will you have to drink? Black tea? Or perhaps a fizzy soda? I happen to have some. Dumbledore took off his hat, hung it on the stand, and asked Aris kindly. Thank you, Professor. Tea is fine. Aris smiled and nodded. You don't look the least bit frightened. Dumbledore waved his wand to brew the tea, studying the boy with interest, and finally satisfied himself there was neither fear nor panic in his eyes. That was no easy thing for a boy of 11, least of all one who just committed what, to ordinary eyes, looked a very grave misstep. I don't follow, Professor. Why should I be frightened? Aris looked at Dumbledore innocently, eyes clear, perhaps even affecting a touch of foolishness. Enough play acting, lad, you've quite the gift for it. Dumbledore saw through the act with ease and called him out on the spot. Tell me, why do you say the study of magic's nature bears on the future of the whole wizarding world? What are your real thoughts on the matter? He regarded the boy thoughtfully, asking it as though in passing. Professor, I think you see it more clearly than I do. By now Aris couldn't be bothered to pretend. With Dumbledore's ability, if he truly wished to enter my mind, it would likely take him only a moment. That he's willing to sit and hear me out already means that, on some ideas at least, this silver-haired wizard and I are of one mind, and that between us there's at least the possibility of an understanding. I don't quite understand. You plainly have better ways to put your views forward. Making such a scene at the welcome feast, on your very first day, that hardly seems like the work of a clever child. Dumbledore spoke again, that same lightness in his tone. But it was the most effective way, wasn't it, Professor? Aris took the tea Dumbledore handed him and had a sip. The taste was rather good, a little brown sugar in it, perhaps. Before this cup, it had never occurred to Aris that one could add brown sugar to black tea. So, your ultimate aim was to make every teacher and student in the school know your name. And then? Dumbledore's tone turned suddenly odd, faintly probing. Professor, I think you've misunderstood. Aris's voice grew sincere. I've never thought of forming factions, nor of overturning the school's teaching, nor even of seizing the spotlight. The only reason I did all this was to get an answer to what the nature of magic is. And Professor McGonagall once promised me she'd give it. Aris. Dumbledore's voice turned suddenly grave. I think you may speak freely here. Why not go on with your views on the Muggles? And how did you come to know them so well? The truth is, without having done a little study of my own, I mightn't understand terms like chemistry and physics at all. Muggle subjects, I take it, names for certain fields of theirs. At that, Aris didn't answer at once. He was quiet a while, then looked at Dumbledore with a slightly searching air. Professor, forgive the impertinence, but I truly want to know, have you genuinely studied chemistry, physics, and the other subjects by which Muggles explain the laws of nature? Honestly. I have. Dumbledore was silent a moment, then nodded firmly. And because I have, I know very well that what you say isn't aimless nonsense. But you must also know the wizarding world runs by its own rules. Magic, spells, none of it can be explained by this science of yours, can it? Aris nodded, and a smile crossed his face. Indeed. Existing science has no way to account for the wonders of magic, or the principles behind spells. His expression grew more serious, edged with a persistent kind of longing. Which is exactly why we ought to study it further, to explore it. Professor, have you ever considered that if, one day, we truly understood the nature of magic, and uncovered the principles of casting by scientific means, then that would mean, we could master magic completely. I don't mean simply casting spells to produce magical effects, as wizards do now. I mean, if that day ever came, perhaps we could grow magic into a far greater civilization. Everything science can do, magic ought to do more easily still. And yet, in fact, it doesn't. Through the study of technology, Muggles have invented craft that fly through the sky. They've invented tools that let people speak across thousands of miles. They've built machines that store information, link it together, even generate it on their own. As the age goes on, the power of their science will surely erupt, and perhaps before long it will leave magic far, far behind. Then it may be the wizard's turn to marvel at Muggle wonders. We'll find that technology can do everything magic can, and do it more conveniently, more simply, besides. And Professor Dumbledore, you've seen the state of the wizarding world as it is. Backward, in decline, without a spark of vitality. How long do you think a wizarding world like that can go on hiding within the Muggle one? 10 years? 20? 100? Better to blend in than to hide. That is what I believe the wizarding world needs now. Not to be wiped out, nor to plunder. Not a meaningless lingering on. He paused. But to truly join that world, in a fitting way. Aris rested his hands on the wooden desk, which came nearly to his chest, and looked at Dumbledore in earnest. The two held each other's gaze for a good minute or more. I think what you've said is worth my careful consideration. At last Dumbledore gently adjusted the half-moon spectacles on his nose, looked away, then rose and paced slowly behind the desk. Professor. Aris sat back down and took another sip of tea. We've plenty of time yet to discuss this, haven't we? Dumbledore stopped and looked at the boy again. Yes, perhaps. Today's conversation can end here. If you'd like to head back to the dormitory and meet your roommates, you may go now. There's one more thing, Professor. Aris thought a moment, and a smile returned to his face. Oh. Dumbledore regarded him meaningfully over his spectacles. Go on. If it's possible, Professor, might you grant me an authorization? I hear the school library has a sizable restricted section. There may be some books in it worth reading. Aris said it frankly. Aris. Dumbledore's expression turned odd again. You know, some books aren't suitable for a first year, those in the restricted section especially. There's a reason they're kept there. A potions book explaining how to brew polyjuice potion, for instance. Aris looked at the silver-haired wizard with a smile, a hint of teasing in it. You know, that sort of book can be bought right off the shelf at Flourish and Blots. Dumbledore plainly caught the dissatisfaction in the boy's tone, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He genuinely couldn't work out how Aris knew there was a polyjuice recipe in the restricted section. Come to think of it, what was that book called again? Most Potenty Potions, was it? Well, I think it's about time to rest. It's terribly rude to disturb an old man's sleep. The old wizard rubbed his temples as if his head ached. About that authorization, though. Aris wasn't ready to let it go, he'd been looking forward to Hogwarts' restricted section for a long time. We'll speak of it another time. If you can earn top marks across all your courses and win your professor's regard, I'll give the matter serious thought. As for now. Dumbledore paused. Don't even think about it. With that, he gave a light wave of his hand. Aris felt his body go weightless and float straight to the office door. Do close the door on your way out, would you? Thank you. Aris. Looking at Dumbledore's resolute expression, he could only shake his head, helpless, and step out of the office. Seems I was a little hasty. This great white wizard may need some time to digest today's talk. No matter, I've plenty of time yet. Newly out of the office, Aris stretched and strolled off at his leisure. 2 minutes later, another figure appeared at the office door. Professor McGonagall glanced in the direction Aris had gone, hesitated, then finally spoke the gargoyle's password and walked in, her feelings a tangle. "Minerva, if I recall rightly, you ought to be inspecting the young wizard's rooms about now. Has something happened?" Dumbledore's voice came from within, a trace of weariness in it. "Professor Dumbledore, you don't look well." McGonagall noticed at once that his brow was faintly furrowed. "It's nothing. I only spoke with that boy, and I've been turning something over." Recalling Aris's composure in the office, and those words that would surely cause an uproar if they got out, the old headmaster suddenly felt his headache worsen. "It seems that of this year's young wizards, Mr. Potter isn't the one you're most worried about, headmaster." McGonagall seemed to have thought of something. She pressed her lips together and said, a little rueful, "Or have we all just been lectured by a first year who's barely through the door?" "Minerva." Dumbledore looked at her helplessly, then changed the subject. "I'm rather more curious how you intend to explain the nature of magic to the boy. He's been waiting on your answer." "Professor, let's not needle each other." McGonagall smiled wryly, her expression more helpless still. "I came to ask your advice. I thought, with your study of magic, you might give me some counsel, a way to put the matter to rest. Otherwise he really might keep pestering me." "I'm sorry, I can't help you there." Dumbledore shook his head, helpless. Even the oldest scholar in the wizarding world, the most seasoned inventor of spells, mightn't give a clear answer to that question. "My suggestion is that you take some time to pick the books back up and study it properly yourself. But I can hardly split myself in two to see to school matters as well." McGonagall frowned slightly. "You'll find the balance in time. I have faith in you, Minerva." Seeing Dumbledore's answers growing more and more evasive, McGonagall knew there was no point pressing further. She pressed her lips together and finally nodded. "Perhaps I really should spend a while in the library." That said, she looked at Dumbledore again, and seeing no response at all, had no choice but to leave the office. Dumbledore hadn't yet grasped what it would mean for Hogwarts, McGonagall throwing herself into her research. Then again, just now he likely hadn't the energy to think on such things, for what Aris had said had given him too much to reckon with, and stirred up memories that weren't altogether pleasant. After McGonagall left, he drew a letter from a drawer of his desk. It looked as though it had been turned over many times, yet Dumbledore opened it once more and read it carefully. There were only a few simple words upon it. "Time is a wondrous thing." Looking at them, Dumbledore's gaze grew distant, as if lost in some memory. It was a long while before Fawkes's phoenix song outside the window drew him back to himself. Then a long sigh filled the office. "It seems it's time I found an occasion to visit you, old friend." With the castle lights dimmed, Aris passed through several buildings and finally reached the West Tower, where the Ravenclaw common room lay. It was thanks to the portraits directing him along the way, otherwise he might have taken far longer. Climbing the spiral stair to the top floor, he came upon an eagle-shaped bronze knocker. Only by seeking out endless knowledge, mastering its mysteries, and rising above ordinary understanding can one find this place. As Aris approached, a voice issued from the knocker, wrapped in an air of mystery. "Then, what place does the riddle point to?" He already knew that to enter the Ravenclaw common room, one had to answer the riddle the bronze knocker posed. It was the only way in. Aris frowned slightly, not because he found the riddle too hard, but because it was surprisingly, unexpectedly easy. Wouldn't the answer simply be the Ravenclaw common room? Correct, the answer is right. As the knocker sounded again, the door to the common room slowly swung open before him. Hardly a challenge at all. Aris smiled and shook his head. Granted, most of the knocker's riddles are reasonable, and the door will nearly always open in the end. But tonight's was far too arbitrary. Ravenclaw's security still isn't strict enough. I'll have to find a chance for a proper chat with the knocker, see if it might set the Ravenclaw first years a few maths problems. That would be a fitting tribute to Ravenclaw's love of wisdom. The moment he stepped inside, cheers went up from within. I knew Shafik would answer the riddle in no time. Oh, come on, tonight's riddle was far too simple. Aris, may I call you that? A young wizard came over and introduced himself, excited. I'm Terry Boot, a first year in your year, same as you. You know what you said in the hall earlier caused an absolute sensation across the whole school. Your name's probably no less famous than Harry Potter's now. Hello, Terry. Aris put on a look of surprise and said, with mock regret, a shame I missed the scene myself. Never mind that, at breakfast tomorrow, they certainly won't have forgotten tonight. You'll be the center of attention all over again. Just then another young wizard spoke up beside him. I'm Anthony Goldstein, a pleasure, Aris. I've a feeling you'll become quite the celebrity at Hogwarts. Honestly, that's no common thing, since Ravenclaws never much like to show off, which naturally makes it harder for them to be noticed, or become anyone's idea of a famous face. Cho Chang's voice came from behind the two of them. She seemed to feel her words might be taken the wrong way, and quickly corrected herself. Of course, I didn't mean you like the spotlight. It's all right, I understand. Aris smiled and shook his head, showing he didn't mind. Cho looked at him, helpless, and explained, I did suggest they head off to bed first, but they've plainly been swept up by what you said, a bit too worked up for that. So I see. Aris looked at Terry and Anthony, amused. He truly hadn't expected that a few words of encouragement would make some of the young wizards treat him like an idol. The gleam in Terry's and Anthony's eyes was unmistakable, they'd been thoroughly won over by his earlier speech. The group chatted a while in the common room, and in the end it was Aris who suggested calling it a night on Ravenclaw's first little gathering. Oh, by the way, Aris, Professor Flitwick's arranged a separate dormitory for you, Terry mentioned as they parted. Ours is full, you see. Of course, if you're ever lonely, I'd be glad to ask the professor to let me room with you. That's kind, but no, thank you. Aris shook his head sincerely. I appreciate the offer, but the truth is I'm used to living alone. Professor Flitwick's arrangement suits me perfectly. All right, then. Terry looked plainly a little disappointed. I'll turn in first, then, good night, everyone. Aris bid them all a last farewell and slipped off down the corridor. Back in the dormitory, he glanced around. His luggage had indeed been delivered, and there was a new class schedule on the desk. A dormitory all to myself, wonderful. Aris was delighted. He already had a good many secrets, and living alone would save him no end of trouble. At the very least, when the little red dragon Iris wanted to come out and play, he wouldn't have to hide her from other eyes here. The thought of Iris drew his gaze, half on instinct, to the window. A silver moon hung high overhead, and from where Aris stood he could just take in the night view of Hogwarts beyond the glass. Most of the world outside lay wrapped in darkness, but by the moonlight one could faintly make out the grounds, the Black Lake, the Forbidden Forest, the Quidditch pitch, and Professor Sprout's herb gardens. No one could deny it, the Ravenclaw common room had the finest view of any of the four houses. But Aris's attention wasn't on the night view just then. He looked up instead at the far reaches of the sky, a smile on his face. Beneath the silver moon, the night sky held nothing out of the ordinary, until, a moment later, Aris heard a dragon's cry only he could hear. It belonged to Iris alone, carried to him through some kind of magical bond. He quickly threw open the window. The next second came the sound of wind tearing through the air. You're back at last, Iris. Aris reached out and caught the small figure that came rushing in. After a month's growth, Iris was no longer the size she'd been, the force of her arrival nearly bowled Aris over. Fortunately he was ready. He quickly adjusted his balance and toppled onto the bed with the little dragon. Wah! The little red dragon let out her familiar baby cry and bounced about in front of him, as if fishing for praise. All right, I know. Iris is the best. With his language of nature talent, Aris had long been able to speak with the little dragon without the slightest barrier, and could even sense the faintest shift in her mood. Listening now to her chatter on about the happy hours she and Luna had spent together, he pictured the scene, and the corner of his mouth curved up once more. Thank you for your hard work. From now on, you can go back and spend more time with Luna. Aris gently stroked the little dragon's head and sighed softly. She's far too lonely, all alone at home. Wah! Iris nodded, human as anything. All right, go and rest for now. I'll let you out to play tomorrow. After calling Iris back into the pet space, Aris picked up the letter she'd just brought. Even before opening it, he seemed to see the little girl leaning over her desk, earnestly writing to him. A smile crossed his face again. Then he lay back on the bed and read the letter by moonlight.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.